Part 1. Gateway to Scandal. Hey there, folks. Tonight, we embark on a strange journey, where the glittering light of the Vatican hides the darkest corners of history. Picture yourself standing in a marble hallway, flickering candlelight dancing on the walls, the scent of frankincense mingling with the whispers of ancient secrets. It's the 10th century, and the throne of Saint Plains, Peter, a symbol of faith, is stained by men who wear the papal crown not to guide souls, but to dominate, exploit, and deceive. If you think surviving a bad workday is tough, you definitely wouldn't last a week in the Vatican back then, unless you're better at dodging scandals than a modern politician. So, before you get cozy, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe switch on a fan for that gentle hum. And let's begin tonight's journey. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to never miss these thrilling adventures. You trudge through the stone-paved streets of Rome, the air damp and heavy, with the acrid smell of smoke from nearby forges. It's 955, and this city is a bubbling stew of ambition, faith, and chaos. The Catholic Church, the heart of the Western world, stands at a crossroads, the throne of Saint Peter, where popes rule with divine authority, is supposed to be a beacon of morality, but you'll soon see. It's often a battleground for power-hungry men. Historians still debate whether this era was the Church's lowest point or just a colourful chapter in its long story. One thing's certain, the men you're about to meet aren't saints. They're rulers, shamas, sometimes murderers draped in holy robes. Let's set the scene. In the 10th century, Rome isn't the dazzling city of Renaissance frescoes you might imagine. It's a maze of dark alleys, crumbling palaces, and feuding noble families, vying for control. The Pope isn't just a spiritual leader, he's a feudal lord, wielding land, armies, and judgment. But how does one become Pope? Not always through holiness. Often, it's about lineage, bribes, or knowing the right people. A strange detail back then. Popes were sometimes chosen by noble families, as if the throne were a family heirloom, passed from father to son like a crown. Sounds more like a medieval drama series than a religious institution. Right, you pause, before the Lateran Palace, the Pope's official residence. Its massive stone walls loom, but you hear laughter echoing from within. Not prayers. A crowd gathers outside, murmuring about the new Pope. A young man named Octavianus, soon to be John XII. A historical truth, John XII was one of the youngest popes, ascending at age 18, installed by his father, Alberic II, a powerful Roman lord. On his deathbed, Alberic forced the nobles to swear they'd place his son on the papal throne. This wasn't a divine election, it was a political plot. You feel a chill breeze as you pass through the palace gates. Something's off here, and you're about to find out why. You step into a grand hall, where torchlight bathes faded frescoes in a warm glow. A group of people, bishops, merchants, courtiers clusters around a long table. Red wine sloshes in goblets, and laughter erupts as someone tells a tale unfit for this sacred space. At the center sits a young man with disheveled black hair and a mischievous grin, the papal ring glinting on his finger. This is John XII. But you wouldn't call him Holy Father. He looks more like a teenager, handed the keys to a treasure vault than the leader of the church. You catch a bishop whispering to his neighbor. He loves parties more than scripture. A light joke if John XII had a social media account. He'd be posting party pics with number holy but fun. You edge closer, and the cheap perfume wafting from a corner makes you wrinkle your nose. a strange detail chroniclers of the time, like Liutprand of Cremona, wrote that John XII turned the Lateran into a brothel, inviting courtesans into the palace and selling holy relics to fund his pleasures. You glance around and spot silver chalices pried from altars, likely pawned for gold. This isn't a place for prayer, it's a medieval nightclub. You wonder, how does someone like this hold the church's highest office? The answer lies in a divided Rome, where families like Alberic's Spoleto clan pull the strings. John XII wasn't chosen for faith, he was chosen for blood. But you soon realize, it's not just about the parties. John XII is a political powder keg. You hear rumors that he's insulted Emperor Otto, ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, by secretly negotiating with his enemies. Otto, a man who doesn't take betrayal lightly, is planning to march on Rome. You sense tension in the air as bishops argue over whether John can hold the throne. One whispers, he swore oaths to pagan gods while drunk. True or jest, no one's sure. But historians still debate whether these accusations were fact or propaganda from John's foes. You feel the weight of their words, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. You leave the banquet hall, stepping into a courtyard where moonlight bathes cracked stone statues in a silver sheen. The music from inside still echoes, but you sense unrest. John XII, with his youth and arrogance, is steering the church into a tempest. You wonder, will he collapse under his own vices? Or will his enemies topple him first? A light joke if John XII lived today. He'd probably get cancelled online for posting party pics at the wrong moment. But this isn't the age of social media. It's the age of swords and schemes. You take a deep breath, the cool night air sharp in your lungs, ready to plunge deeper into the tale of these wayward popes, where every step draws you closer to their dark truths. You linger in the courtyard, the cobblestones cold beneath your feet, and let your gaze drift to the stars above, each one a silent witness to Rome's tangled history. The scent of damp stone and distant forges grounds you as you reflect on this moment. The church, meant to be a lighthouse for the faithful, has become a battleground, its throne a prize for men like John XII, who see power, not duty. You think of the pilgrims who still flock to Rome, their faith tested by the very men meant to guide them. Their resilience, despite the scandals, is a quiet miracle, a thread of hope woven through the chaos. You wander toward a small chapel at the courtyard's edge, its wooden door creaking as you push it open. The scent of incense and cedar wraps around you, and you see a single candle burning on the altar, its flames steady, despite the draught. A lone monk kneels in prayer, his murmured words, a soft counterpoint to the revelry you left behind. You pose, feeling the weight of his devotion, a stark contrast to John XII's recklessness. This monk, and others like him, are the church's heartbeat, keeping faith alive even as its leaders falter. You wonder if they sense the storm coming, the clash between John and Otto that could shake Rome to its core. You step back into the courtyard, the night air crisp against your skin. The stars seem brighter now, as if urging you to keep going, to uncover the next chapter of this story. You think of the popes who will follow John XII, some as corrupt, others striving to redeem the throne. The church's journey is one of falls and recoveries, of men who betray it and those who save it. You feel the cobblestones beneath you, solid despite their cracks. A reminder that even flawed foundations can endure. A final light joke. If the Vatican had a suggestion box back then, John XII would have tossed it into the Tiber to avoid the complaints. You take a deep breath, the scent of jasmine from a nearby garden mingling with the smoke of Rome's forges. The bell tolls once more, its sound fading into the night. A gentle nudge to continue. You turn toward a narrow street, the shadows beckoning, ready to step deeper into the saga of these flawed popes, where the line between saint and sinner blurs, and the church's soul hangs in the balance. Part 2. The debauched New Street, and in the shadows of a narrow alley near the Lateran Palace, where the musty smell of damp stone walls mingles with the sharp tang of wine spilling from open windows, raucous laughter and the clink of goblets echo from within, where John XII, the teenage pope, continues his reckless, indulgent lifestyle. It's 955, and Rome is simmering with rumours about the 18-year-old pontiff who treats the throne of St. Peter like a lavish toy. You feel the chaos in the air, as if the city is waiting for a single spark to ignite an explosion. Remember those parties drenched in cheap perfume at the palace? Well, you're about to see they're nothing compared to the havoc John XII wreaks next. You slip into a secluded corner of the palace, where torchlight casts a warm glow on faded frescoes, depicting saints whose eyes seem to judge the scene below. A historical truth. John XII, born Octavianus, was installed as Pope in 955 by his father, Alberic II, who, on his deathbed, coerced Rome's nobles to swear allegiance to his son. This wasn't a sacred election, it was a power deal. With John, a teenager with no experience or piety, as the beneficiary, you overhear a servant whispering to another. He's never read a full Bible, but he knows every brothel in the city. A light joke if John XII had a LinkedIn profile. His top skill would definitely be party planning. Instead of spiritual leadership, you venture deeper into the palace, stepping over stained tapestries and past silver chalices pried from altars. Their absence, a silent accusation. A strange detail chroniclers of the time, like Liutprand of Cremona, wrote that John XII not only hosted debauched feasts but was accused of invoking pagan gods while drunk, even gambling with bishops over dice. You glimpse a courtyard where a group revels around a table laden with wine and roasted meats, while a young woman, likely one of John's infamous guests, performs a dance far too risque for this holy place. You shake your head, wondering how a sanctuary meant to be the heart of faith has become a medieval nightclub. Historians still debate whether tales of John's depravity were exaggerated by his enemies, like Emperor Otto I, or truly reflected his character. The air hums with uncertainty, as if the truth is a puzzle missing half its pieces. You step into a dimly lit corridor, where the scent of frankincense struggles to mask the stench of wine and sweat. Here, you catch whispers of political rumors shaking Rome to its core. John XII isn't just a party enthusiast, he's a diplomatic disaster. A priest murmurs that John has secretly corresponded with the enemies of Otto I, the formidable emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Otto, a stern man with a beard like a Viking warrior, isn't one to forgive betrayal. You feel the atmosphere thicken, heavy with unspoken fears, as John's advisors debate how to handle Otto's growing wrath. One says, if Otto reaches Rome, we'll need more than wine to save the throne. A light joke to ease the mood. If John knew Otto was coming, he'd probably try bribing him with a barrel of wine. But even that wouldn't cut it. You enter a small chamber, its air warm with torchlight and the faint crackle of burning wood. John XII lounges in a cushioned chair, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. Yet he flashes a smug grin. His papal robe looks hastily thrown on, as if he stumbled out of a brawl after a long night. You hear him bark for more wine, dismissing an elderly bishop's counsel with a biting quip. This is the head of the Catholic Church. But you feel like you're watching a young, arrogant king rather than a spiritual guide. A strange detail some sources claim: John once turned sacred rituals into jokes, even ordaining a horse as a bishop in a drunken jest. True or fabricated, No one knows for sure, but it fits the portrait of a man who treats the throne as his personal stage. You stand in the corner, the shadows cloaking you, and sense the recklessness radiating from him, like a flame too wild to control. You pose, your boots scuffing the stone floor, the sound swallowed by the low hum of voices. The chamber feels alive, its walls seeming to pulse with the weight of John's choices. You think back to the Lateran's grandeur, now a mockery of its purpose, and wonder how the faithful endure. Pilgrims beyond these walls still pray, their devotion a fragile thread stretched thin by scandals like this. You imagine them huddled in Rome's churches, clutching rosaries, hoping for a pope who embodies faith, not folly. The contrast is stark, their quiet piety against John's brazen excess. You feel a pang of sympathy for those who look to the church for guidance, only to find a teenager more interested in wine than wisdom. You move closer to John's chair, the scent of his rosewater perfume cloying in the stuffy air. His laughter cuts through the room, sharp and careless, as he recounts a crude story to his entourage. You notice the nervous glances of his advisors, their faces etched with worry. They know Rome is a tinderbox, and John's actions are a lit match. You hear whispers of his diplomatic blunders not just with Otto, but with local nobles who resent his family's grip on the city. The Spoleto clan, led by his late father, Alberic, still casts a long shadow, but John's recklessness threatens to unravel their legacy. You wonder if he even cares, or if the throne is just a game to him, a glittering prize to be enjoyed, not guarded. Suddenly, you hear the heavy thud of boots echoing from the corridor. Amesnia bursts in, his face pale as parchment, gasping that Otto's army is drawing near Rome. The room falls silent, save for the faint crackle of the torches. John XII shrugs, as if it's a minor inconvenience, but you catch the flicker of anxiety in his advisor's eyes. Otto, enraged by John's betrayal, has summoned a council to investigate the Pope. You hear the charges listed: selling church offices, murder, incest, even summoning demons. Historians still debate whether these accusations held truth or were Otto's pretext to depose John. Either way, you know John's throne is teetering, a fragile thing built on hubris and wine. You leave the chamber, stepping into a courtyard where moonlight bathes cracked stone statues in a ghostly glow. The music from the feast still drifts through the air, but it's drowned out by the anxious murmurs of a crowd gathering outside. Rome stands on the brink. Otto is coming, and John XII, with his arrogance and inexperience, seems ill-prepared to face him. You feel a chill run through you, as if the night itself is bracing for what's to come. A final light joke, if John XII thought partying was his biggest challenge. He's about to learn that an angry emperor is scarier than a drunk bishop. You linger in the courtyard, the cobblestones cold beneath your feet, their uneven surfaces a map of Rome's turbulent history. The stars above burn bright, silent witnesses to the drama unfolding below. You think of the church, meant to be a beacon of faith, now a stage for a teenager's folly. You recall the pilgrims beyond these walls, their prayers rising like smoke, undeterred by John's scandals. Their faith is a quiet miracle, a testament to something greater than the men who fail it. You wonder how long they can endure, how many more popes like John they can withstand before their trust frays. You wander toward a small fountain, its water gurgling softly, reflecting the moonlight in shimmering ripples. You dip your fingers into the cool stream, feeling the gentle current, a reminder that even in chaos, life flows on. The scent of damp earth and distant forges grounds you as you reflect on John's reign. He's not just a pope, he's a warning, a lesson in what happens when power is given to the unprepared, the unfaithful. You think of Otto, his army drawing closer, his patience worn thin. The clash is inevitable, a storm that will test the church's strength, its ability to survive its own leaders. You step back, the night air crisp against your skin, and glance at the palace. Its windows aglow with the flicker of torchlight. The music has faded, replaced by the tense whispers of those inside, bracing for what's next. You feel the weight of this moment, as if Rome itself is holding its breath, waiting to see if John XII will fall to his enemies or his own vices. You think of the popes who will follow, some as flawed, others striving to redeem the throne. The church's journey is one of stumbles and recoveries, of men who betray it and those who save it. You take a deep breath, the scent of jasmine from a nearby garden mingling with the smoke of Rome's forges. The bell tolls once more, its sound fading into the night. A gentle nudge to continue. You turn toward a narrow street, the shadows beckoning, ready to step deeper into the saga of these wayward popes, where the throne of St. Peter remains a prize, a burden, and a test of faith. Part 3. Selling the Throne. You stand in a shadowed corner of Rome, where the flickering light from torches on the stone walls creates dancing silhouettes, as if whispering ancient secrets. The acrid smell of smoke from nearby forges blends with the low murmur of a crowd gathered outside a small church, their faces taut under the moonlight. It's 1032, and Rome remains a crucible of ambition, where power is bought and sold, like goods in a marketplace. Remember those wine-soaked, perfume-drenched feasts of John XII. You're about to meet someone, even stranger, Benedict IX, a pope who not only defiled the throne of St. Peter, but sold it like a second-hand trinket. The air feels heavy, as if the city is holding its breath, bracing for another scandal. You slip into a narrow hallway leading to a small chamber in the Lateran Palace, where the scent of frankincense tries to mask the stench of wine and sweat. Candlelight flickers across walls, carved with intricate patterns, but it can't hide the pervasive sense of decay. A historical truth. Benedict IX, born Theophylactus of Tusculum, became pope in 1032, likely in his early 20s, through the machinations of the Tusculum family, a powerful clan controlling Rome. This wasn't a sacred election, it was a family deal, with Benedict placed on the throne like a pawn in a power game. You overhear a bishop whispering to a servant. He doesn't know how to pray, but he sure knows how to stir trouble. A light joke if Benedict IX had a LinkedIn profile. His top skill would be throne trading instead of spiritual leadership. You step into the chamber, where candlelight glimmers on stained tapestries and silver chalices pried from altars. Their absence, a silent accusation. At the center, Benedict IX lounges on a velvet-cushioned chair, his papal robe comically oversized on his lanky frame. His eyes sparkle with mischief, as if he's plotting a dangerous prank. Around him, a motley crew of cardinals and elegantly dressed women laugh and sip red wine from gilded goblets. A strange detail chroniclers like Raoul Glaber wrote that Benedict was accused of hosting debauched feasts in the Vatican, even suspected of crimes like rape, adultery, and dabbling in black magic. You glance at a corner where a group plays a bizarre game, tossing coins to see who can catch them without using their hands. You shake your head, wondering how the church fell into the hands of someone like this. You edge closer, the cloying scent of perfume making you wince. Benedict's raucous laughter fills the room as he recounts a crude tale, prompting uproarious guffaws. But you notice a flicker of unease behind his smirk. Rome doesn't love Benedict. You hear rumors that the people, accustomed to corruption, are seething over his actions. A servant whispers, They call him a demon in a pope's robe. Historians still debate whether stories of Benedict's depravity were inflated by his enemies, like rival families or Emperor Henry III, or if they truly reflected his character. Either way, you sense his throne is trembling, and not just because of the parties. The air hums with tension, as if the palace walls are bracing for collapse. You leave the chamber, stepping into a dark corridor where the music from the feast is drowned out by distant shouts. A crowd gathers in the streets, raising fists and demanding Benedict's resignation. You hear one yell, "He shames Saint Peter." The first rebellion against Benedict erupts, and you see him flee Rome, escaping with a handful of loyalists. But the story doesn't end there. You hear he returns, backed by the Tusculum family, only to be ousted again. And then, in a twist that shocks even scandal-hardened Rome, Benedict does the unthinkable. He sells the papal throne. You stand in a secret room, where Benedict meets John XII, a wealthy priest and his godfather. A single candle's light illuminates their strained faces. Benedict, with a half-smirk, offers to sell the papacy to Gratian for a heap of gold. Gratian, later Pope Gregory VI, accepts, perhaps hoping to restore peace to the church. A light joke to ease the mood, if this were a movie. This scene would have a subtitle reading, "Based on a true story too wild to believe." You feel the air grow heavy as the deal is sealed. The throne of Saint Peter, a symbol of faith, is now no different from a market stall's wares. But Benedict doesn't stop. You hear he changes his mind, trying to reclaim the throne not once, but twice. The result, the church plunges into chaos, with 3 men simultaneously claiming to be Pope Benedict, Gregory VI, and another backed by opposing factions. You stand outside a council in Rome, where Emperor Henry III, a tall man with a piercing gaze, summons bishops to untangle this mess. Henry's voice booms like thunder, ordering all 3 popes removed, installing a new one to cleanse the church's tarnished name. You hear whispers of Benedict's excommunication, not once, but multiple times, depending on which faction holds sway. A strange detail, some sources claim Benedict lived in exile, but kept meddling in church politics. Like a bit actor, refusing to leave the stage. You step away from the council, standing under Rome's starry sky. Church bells toll, but their sound carries no peace. Benedict IX has left an indelible stain on the church, turning the throne into a power game. You feel a chill as you ponder what he's done selling the papacy, sparking a crisis of faith and leaving a fractured church. A final light joke, if Benedict IX had a motto, it'd probably be "Throne sold. Faith who needs it." You take a deep breath, ready to step further into the story, where more wayward popes await to reveal their dark secrets. You linger in the square, the cobblestones cold beneath your boots. Their uneven surfaces, a map of Rome's turbulent past. The stars above burn bright, silent witnesses to the drama unfolding below. You think of the church, meant to be a beacon of faith, now a stage for Benedict's audacious schemes. You recall the pilgrims beyond these walls, their prayers rising like smoke, undeterred by his scandals. Their faith is a quiet miracle, a testament to something greater than the men who fail it. You wonder how long they can endure, how many more popes like Benedict they can withstand before their trust frays. You wander toward a small fountain, its water gurgling softly, reflecting the moonlight in shimmering ripples. You dip your fingers into the cool stream, feeling the gentle current, a reminder that even in chaos, life flows on. The scent of damp earth and distant forges grounds you as you reflect on Benedict's reign. He's not just a pope, he's a warning, a lesson in what happens when power is given to the unprepared. The unfaithful. You think of Henry III, his council reshaping the church, his resolve a stark contrast to Benedict's caprice. The clash is inevitable, a storm that will test the church's strength, its ability to survive its own leaders. You step back, the night air crisp against your skin, and glance at the palace. Its windows aglow with the flicker of torchlight. The music has faded, replaced by the tense whispers of those inside. Bracing for what's next, you feel the weight of this moment, as if Rome itself is holding its breath, waiting to see if Benedict IX will fall to his enemies or his own vices. You think of the popes who will follow, some as flawed, others striving to redeem the throne. The Church's journey is one of stumbles and recoveries, of men who betray it and those who save it. You take a deep breath, the scent of jasmine from a nearby garden mingling with the smoke of Rome's forges. The bell tolls once more, its sound fading into the night. A gentle nudge to continue. You turn toward a narrow street, the shadows beckoning, ready to step deeper into the saga of these wayward popes, where the throne of St. Peter remains a prize, a burden, and a test of faith. Part 4. Father of the Pornocracy. You stand in a darkened alley in Rome, where the faint glow of torches on the stone walls barely illuminates the muddy puddles underfoot. The musty smell of the nearby Tiber River mingles with the anxious whispers of passers-by, their voices low and tense. It's 904, and Rome is sinking into a mire of power struggles, where the throne of St. Peter is manipulated by ruthless families. Remember how Benedict IX sold the papacy like a market trinket? Well, you're about to meet the man who laid the groundwork for that dark era, Sergius III, who ushered in the so-called pornocracy, a period when the church was ruled by lust and intrigue. The air feels oppressive, as if the city is waiting for a dreadful secret to unravel. You slip into a secret passage leading to the Lateran Palace, where the scent of frankincense struggles to mask the stench of wine and decadence. Candlelight flickers across stone walls, etched with intricate patterns, but it can't dispel the pervasive unease. A historical truth: Sergius III became pope in 904 after a bloody power struggle, in which his rivals were assassinated or imprisoned. This wasn't a sacred election, it was a triumph of violence. With Sergius, an ambitious man, backed by the powerful Theophylact family, you overhear a servant whispering to a bishop. He rules not with scripture, but with a sword. A light joke if Sergius III had a motto. It'd probably be Faith Nah. Power's the real king. You step into a grand hall, where torchlight dances on stained tapestries and faded frescoes, their colours muted by time. At the centre, Sergius III sits on a carved wooden chair, his papal robe draping his tall, imposing frame. His eyes are sharp and cold, as if piercing through every plot. Around him, a group of cardinals and Theophylact family members murmur about political schemes. A strange detail: Sergius was accused of having an affair with Marozia, a teenage Theophylact girl, when she was just 15. This liaison wasn't just shocking, it produced a son who later became Pope John XI. Yes, you heard that right, a pope fathered another pope. You shake your head, wondering how the church sank to such depths. You edge closer, catching the rich scent of expensive perfume from a corner of the room. Marozia, with long black hair and a calculating smile, stands beside Sergius, her eyes glinting with the confidence of someone who knows she holds power. You hear a bishop whisper, "She's the one truly ruling Rome." Historians still debate whether Marozia was the queen of the pornocracy, as later chroniclers claimed, or simply a clever woman slandered for her ambition. Either way, you sense that Sergius and Marozia are a dangerous duo, turning the Vatican into a chessboard where faith is just a pawn. The air hums with their unspoken alliance, a partnership as potent as it is perilous. You leave the hall, stepping into a dark corridor where the whispers of Sergius's advisors are drowned out by distant church bells. But these bells bring no peace. You hear that Sergius ordered the destruction of his predecessor's legacy, Pope Formosus, who was infamously tried in the notorious Cadaver Synod. Sergius didn't just revisit the trial, he declared Formosus a traitor, annulled his decrees, and ordered his body reburied without rites. A light joke to ease the tension if Sergius had a to-do list. Revenge on the dead would be task 1. Followed by keep revenging. You feel a chill, as if the corridor's shadows are whispering of the church's desecration. You stand in a small chamber, where Sergius meets his allies. A single candle's light casts stark shadows on their tense faces. You hear him command the appointment of loyal bishops, selling church offices to the highest bidders. A strange detail, some sources claim Sergius staged mock rituals, parodying sacred masses to entertain his friends. True or fabricated, no one knows for sure. But it fits the image of a man who sees the throne as a tool for power. You feel the air grow heavy as his allies discuss controlling Rome. From collecting taxes to deploying troops, the room feels like a war council, not a holy conclave. Its walls seeming to pulse with their ruthless ambition. You pose, your boots scuffing the stone floor, the sound swallowed by the low hum of voices. The chamber's air is thick, the scent of wax and wine mingling in a cloying haze. You think back to the Lateran's grandeur, now a mockery of its sacred purpose, and wonder how the faithful endure. Pilgrims beyond these walls still pray. Their devotion, a fragile thread stretched thin by scandals like this. You imagine them huddled in Rome's churches, clutching rosaries, hoping for a pope who embodies faith, not treachery. The contrast is stark, their quiet piety against Sergius's brazen power plays. You feel a pang of sympathy for those who look to the church for guidance, only to find a man more interested in swords than salvation. You move closer to Sergius's chair, the scent of his cedar-scented robe cutting through the room's staleness. His voice is low but commanding, issuing orders with the confidence of a warlord. You notice Marozia's subtle gestures. A nod here, a glance there, guiding the conversation like a conductor. Their partnership is a dance of power, each step calculated, each move dangerous. You hear whispers of their plans to secure Rome's wealth, to crush rival families, to ensure their lineage dominates the church. The Theophylact family's grip is ironclad, but you sense cracks forming. As rival factions grow restless under Sergius's rule, suddenly, you hear the hurried patter of footsteps from the corridor. A messenger bursts in, reporting that a rival family is plotting to overthrow Sergius. The room falls silent, save for the candle's faint crackle. Sergius, with a cold smile, orders the traitors dealt with, no matter the cost. You catch Marozia's eyes flash, as if she's ready to play her part in this deadly game. You wonder, will Sergius hold the throne? Or will his own schemes be the blade that cuts him down? The air feels electric, as if the palace is a powder keg awaiting a spark. You leave the chamber, stepping into a courtyard where moonlight bathes cracked stone statues in a ghostly glow. The church bells still echo, but they can't dispel the unease. Sergius III has laid the foundation for a dark era, turning the church into a stage for lust, violence, and family power. You feel a chill as you ponder his legacy, a divided church, a sullied throne, and a son destined to follow his path. A final light joke, if Sergius III had a family crest, it'd be a sword piercing a Bible. You take a deep breath, ready to step further into the story, where more wayward popes await to reveal their darker secrets. You linger in the courtyard, the cobblestones cold beneath your boots. Their uneven surfaces, a map of Rome's turbulent past. The stars above burn bright, silent witnesses to the drama unfolding below. You think of the church, meant to be a beacon of faith, now a playground for Sergius's ambition. You recall the pilgrims beyond these walls, their prayers rising like smoke, undeterred by his scandals. Their faith is a quiet miracle, a testament to something greater than the men who fail it. You wonder how long they can endure, how many more popes like Sergius they can withstand before their trust frays. You wander toward a small fountain, its water gurgling softly, reflecting the moonlight in shimmering ripples. You dip your fingers into the cool stream, feeling the gentle current, a reminder that even in chaos, life flows on. The scent of damp earth and distant forges grounds you as you reflect on Sergius's reign. He's not just a pope, he's a warning, a lesson in what happens when power is given to the ruthless, the unfaithful. You think of Marozia, her influence a shadow over Rome, her son, a future pope, destined to inherit this tainted legacy. The clash is inevitable, a storm that will test the church's strength, its ability to survive its own leaders. You step back, the night air crisp against your skin, and glance at the palace. Its windows aglow with the flicker of torchlight. The whispers have faded, replaced by the tense silence of those inside. Bracing for what's next, you feel the weight of this moment, as if Rome itself is holding its breath, waiting to see if Sergius III will fall to his enemies or his own vices. You think of the popes who will follow, some as flawed, others striving to redeem the throne. The church's journey is one of stumbles and recoveries, of men who betray it and those who save it. You take a deep breath, the scent of jasmine from a nearby garden mingling with the smoke of Rome's forges. The bell tolls once more, its sound fading into the night. A gentle nudge to continue. You turn toward a narrow street, the shadows beckoning, ready to step deeper into the saga of these wayward popes, where the throne of St. Cal, Peter remains a prize, a burden, and a test of faith. Part 5. The Cadaver Synod Street, and in a shadowed corner of Rome, where the dim glow of torches on the stone walls casts just enough light to reveal the muddy puddles underfoot. The musty smell of the nearby Tiber River blends with the panicked whispers of a crowd gathered outside the Lateran Basilica. It's 897, and Rome is sinking into a political quagmire, where the throne of St. Tema, Peter, has become a battlefield for twisted schemes. Remember how Sergius III turned the Vatican into a chessboard of lust and power? Well, you're about to witness a story even more bizarre. Stephen VI, the Pope who staged the Cadaver Synod, a trial of a corpse to exact revenge. The air feels oppressive, as if the city is holding its breath before a nightmare unfolds. You slip into a secret passage leading to the Lateran Basilica, where the scent of frankincense fails to mask a faint whiff of decay lingering in the air. Candlelight flickers across stone walls, etched with sacred carvings. But it can't dispel the overwhelming dread. A historical truth: Stephen VI became Pope in 896, backed by the powerful Spoleto family. During a time when Rome was torn by factions vying for the papal throne, he ascended not for faith, but as a pawn of those seeking vengeance against his predecessor, Pope Formosus. You overhear a servant whispering to a bishop. Stephen wants to erase Formosus's name, even though he's dead. A light joke if Stephen VI had a social media account. His status would probably read, "busy judging a corpse." You step into the basilica, where candlelight dances across rows of marble columns, their shadows weaving a tapestry of unease. At the center, a sight chills you to the bone: a corpse, dressed in papal robes, propped up on a throne, supported by two trembling servants. This is the body of Pope Formosus, exhumed from his tomb 9 months after his death. A strange detail: Stephen VI ordered the Cadaver Synod, a formal trial to prosecute Formosus for crimes like violating church law and illegitimately claiming the papacy. You see Stephen, his eyes wild with fervour, his shrill voice hurling accusations at the lifeless figure. A young deacon, pale as parchment, is tasked with answering for Formosus, his voice quaking as if he fears the dead man's ghost. You shake your head, wondering how a holy place became the stage for such a macabre drama. You edge closer, the faint stench of decay making you wince. The crowd in the basilica, cardinals, clergy, and commoners, stands in silence, some muttering prayers, others staring with horrified eyes. Stephen, draped in papal robes, paces before Formosus's corpse, pointing and condemning him for treason. You hear him shout, "You dared sit on St. Peter's throne." Unworthy historians still debate whether Stephen acted out of fanaticism, political revenge, or sheer madness. Whatever the reason, you sense this trial isn't just about Formosus. It's a blow aimed at his living allies, a warning to any who'd challenge Stephen's backers. The air hums with a sinister energy, as if the basilica's stones are recoiling from the blasphemy. You leave the basilica, stepping into a dark corridor where Stephen's shouts still echo, their venom seeping into the walls. But you realize his actions bring no peace. You hear rumors that Rome's people are seething, outraged by this desecration. A bystander whispers, "Judging the dead, only a demon would do that." Then, you catch the sound of distant yells. A mob is gathering in the streets, raising fists and demanding Stephen's downfall. A light joke to ease the tension: if Stephen thought trying a corpse was a bright idea, he's definitely not ready for Rome's angry mob. You stand in a small chamber, where Stephen meets his allies. A single candle's light casts stark shadows on their tense faces. You hear him order Formosus's sentence, the corpse stripped of papal robes, its blessing finger severe, and the body cast into the Tiber. You feel the air grow heavy as Stephen's allies nod, but their eyes betray unease. A strange detail: some sources claim Formosus's body was later fished out by a local, and rumors spread that the corpse performed miracles, further fueling public rage against Stephen. True or fabricated, no one knows for sure, but it adds to Rome's chaos. The room feels suffocating, its walls seeming to close in with the weight of Stephen's folly. You pose, your boots scuffing the stone floor, the sound swallowed by the low hum of voices. The chamber's air is thick, the scent of wax and fear mingling in a cloying haze. You think back to the basilica's sanctity, now a mockery, and wonder how the faithful endure. Pilgrims beyond these walls still pray, their devotion a fragile thread stretched thin by scandals like this. You imagine them huddled in Rome's churches, clutching rosaries, hoping for a pope who embodies faith, not madness. The contrast is stark, their quiet piety against Stephen's grotesque spectacle. You feel a pang of sympathy for those who look to the church for guidance, only to find a man more interested in vengeance than salvation. You move closer to Stephen's chair, the scent of his sweat-soaked robe cutting through the room's staleness. His voice is sharp, issuing orders with the frenzy of a man possessed. You notice the nervous glances of his allies, their faces etched with worry. They know Rome is a tinderbox, and Stephen's actions are a lit match. You hear whispers of his political blunders, not just the trial, but his alliance with the Spoleto family, who've alienated Rome's other factions. The Spoleto's grip is slipping, and Stephen's recklessness threatens to unravel their power. You wonder if he even cares, or if the throne is just a stage for his vendetta, a fleeting prize to be wielded, not cherished. Suddenly, you hear the hurried patter of footsteps from the corridor. A messenger bursts in, reporting that a riot has erupted. The mob, enraged by the Cadaver Synod, is besieging the palace. The room falls silent, save for the candle's faint crackle. Stephen, his face ashen, orders more guards, but you catch the panic in his eyes. You wonder, does he realize his actions have pushed Rome to the brink? Not long after, you hear he's captured, thrown into a dungeon, and eventually strangled by his enemies. A final light joke: if Stephen VI had a tombstone, it had read "Judged the dead," but couldn't escape the living. You leave the chamber, stepping into a courtyard where moonlight bathes cracked stone statues in a ghostly glow. The church bells toll, but they bring no peace. Stephen VI has left a horrific stain on the church, turning St. Peter's throne into a stage for a sick drama. You feel a chill as you ponder his legacy: a divided church, a city in revolt, and a tale that makes even the hardiest shudder. You take a deep breath, ready to step further into the story, where more wayward popes await to reveal their darker secrets. You linger in the courtyard, the cobblestones cold beneath your boots, their uneven surfaces, a map of Rome's turbulent past. The stars above burn bright, silent witnesses to the drama unfolding below. You think of the church, meant to be a beacon of faith, now a playground for Stephen's madness. You recall the pilgrims beyond these walls, their prayers rising like smoke, undeterred by his scandals. Their faith is a quiet miracle, a testament to something greater than the men who fail it. You wonder how long they can endure, how many more popes like Stephen they can withstand before their trust frays. You wander toward a small fountain, its water gurgling softly, reflecting the moonlight in shimmering ripples. You dip your fingers into the cool stream, feeling the gentle current, a reminder that even in chaos, life flows on. The scent of damp earth and distant forges grounds you as you reflect on Stephen's reign. He's not just a pope, he's a warning, a lesson in what happens when vengeance consumes the sacred. You think of the mob, their fury, a tide that swept Stephen away. Their rage, a cry for a church worth believing in. The clash was inevitable, a storm that tested the church's strength, its ability to survive its own leaders. You step back, the night air crisp against your skin, and glance at the basilica. Its silhouette, a silent sentinel, the whispers have faded, replaced by the tense silence of a city reeling from Stephen's folly. You feel the weight of this moment, as if Rome itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what comes next. You think of the popes who will follow, some as flawed, others striving to redeem the throne. The church's journey is one of stumbles and recoveries, of men who betray it and those who save it. You take a deep breath, the scent of jasmine from a nearby garden mingling with the smoke of Rome's forges. The bell tolls once more, its sound fading into the night. A gentle nudge to continue. You turn toward a narrow street, the shadows beckoning, ready to step deeper into the saga of these wayward popes, where the throne of St. Peter remains a prize, a burden, and a test of faith. Part 6. King of the Borgias. You stand in a narrow alley in Rome, where the flickering light from torches on the stone walls glimmers on the puddles beneath your feet. The sweet scent of jasmine from a nearby garden mingles with the lively strains of music drifting from the Vatican palace. It's 1492, and Rome pulses with the opulence of the Renaissance. But beneath its dazzling veneer lies a swamp of corruption. Remember how Stephen VI turned the basilica into a stage for the grotesque Cadaver Synod? Well, you're about to meet someone even more notorious: Alexander VI, the Borgia pope who transformed the throne of St. Peter into a seat of ambition, lust, and intrigue. The air feels heavy, as if the city is bracing for a deadly secret to unravel. You slip into a secret passage leading to the Vatican Palace, where the scent of frankincense intertwines with the rich aroma of expensive perfume. Candlelight bathes newly painted frescoes of angels, but they can't mask the pervasive sense of decadence. A historical truth: Alexander VI, born Rodrigo Borgia, became Pope in 1492 after a bribery-fueled election, buying cardinals' votes with gold and promises of power. This wasn't a triumph of faith, it was a political deal. With Alexander, an ambitious Spaniard, seizing the church's helm, you overhear a cardinal whispering to a servant. He doesn't pray, he plots. A light joke: if Alexander VI had a social media account, his bio would probably read, Holy Father, but also Mafia Boss. You step into a lavish banquet hall, where crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across Persian rugs and tables groaning with feasts. The air is warm, thick with the scents of roasted pheasant, spiced wine, and candied fruits. At the center, Alexander VI on a gilded throne, his papal robes draping his stout frame. His eyes gleam with cunning, tempered by a trace of cruelty. Around him are the Borgia Cesare, his son, a cardinal with a predator's gaze, and Sibylla, his cunning ally, beautiful but shadowed by rumors of dark secrets. A strange detail: Alexander was infamous for orchestrating the banquet of chestnuts, a Vatican revelry where dozens of courtesans entertained guests, with Alexander watching as coins were tossed for dancers to catch in unconventional ways. You glance at a corner where performers sway, coins clinking as the crowd roars, and shake your head, wondering how the church became a stage for such debauchery. You edge closer, the sharp tang of red wine catching your senses. Alexander's laughter booms, raising a goblet to toast a newly appointed cardinal bought. Of course, for a steep price. The scent of his sandalwood cologne lingers, a contrast to the room's excess. You hear whispers that he sells church offices like market wares, tossing cardinal hats to anyone with enough gold. His hands, adorned with jeweled rings, gesture expansively, as if the Vatican were his personal empire. Yet, beneath the revelry, you sense a calculated edge. A man who plays the game of power with deadly precision. You wonder how many secrets are buried in those sharp eyes. How many rivals have been silenced by his cunning. You pose, your boots sinking slightly into the plush rug, the hall's warmth enveloping you like a heavy cloak. The chandeliers murmur with secrets, their crystals catching the chaos like a glittering mirror. You think of the church, meant to guide souls, is a playground for Alexander's ambition. The contrast with Stephen VI's madness is stark. Yet both have tainted the throne's sanctity, turning it into a stage for their own dramas. You imagine the pilgrims beyond these walls, clutching rosaries in dimly lit, their prayers a faint echo against the din of this feast. Their faith endures, a quiet miracle amidst the Borgia's corruption, a testament to a church greater than its flawed leaders. You feel a pang of sympathy for them, yearning for a pope who embodies salvation. Not scheming, you move closer to Alexander's throne, the scent of wine growing stronger, its sweetness almost cloying. His voice, rich and commanding, cuts through the hall as he jests with a cardinal, his words laced with double meanings. You notice Cesare's intenser stare, his fingers drumming on a dagger's hilt, and Sibylla's subtle gestures, steering conversations with a glance. The Borgias are a machine, each part moving in sync to expand their dynasty. You hear murmurs of their plans: Caesare's conquests, Sibylla's strategic marriages, Alexander's web of alliances. The Vatican, once a sanctuary, is now a war room, its walls pulsing with their ruthless ambition. Suddenly, you hear the hurried patter of footsteps from a side corridor. A messenger bursts in, reporting that one of Alexander's rivals has died under mysterious circumstances, poison. Perhaps. The room falls silent, save for the candle's faint crackle. Alexander, with a cold smile, orders the plan to proceed. As if the death were a minor detail, you catch Caesare's eyes flash, as if he's ready to take his place in this lethal game. You wonder, will Alexander hold the throne? Or will his own schemes be the blade that cuts him down? The air feels electric, as if the palace is a powder keg, awaiting a spark. You leave the chamber, stepping into a courtyard where moonlight bathes intricately carved stone statues in a silvery glow. The church bells toll, but they bring no peace. Alexander VI has turned the church into a family empire, where faith is traded for gold, power, and blood. You feel a chill as you ponder his legacy, a divided church, a city living in fear, and a mysterious death in 1503. When he collapsed, perhaps from the very poison meant for his foes. A final light joke: if Alexander VI had a tombstone, it had read King of the Vatican, but lost his own game. You take a deep breath, ready to step further into the story, where more wayward popes await to reveal their darker secrets. You linger in the courtyard, the cobblestones cool beneath your boots, their uneven surfaces a map of Rome's turbulent past. The stars above burn bright, silent witnesses to the drama unfolding below. You think of the church, meant to be a beacon of faith, now a playground for the Borgia's ambition. You recall the pilgrims beyond these walls, their prayers rising like smoke, undeterred by Alexander's scandals. Their faith is a quiet miracle, a testament to something greater than the men who fail it. You wonder how long they can endure, how many more popes like Alexander they can withstand before their trust phrase. You wander toward a small fountain, its water gurgling softly, reflecting the moonlight in shimmering ripples. You dip your fingers into the cool stream, feeling the gentle current, a reminder that even in chaos, life flows on. The scent of damp earth and distant forges grounds you as you reflect on Alexander's reign. He's not just a pope, he's a warning, a lesson in what happens when faith is subordinated to family ambition. You think of Cesare, his conquests carving a bloody path, and Sibylla, her marriages weaving a web of power. The clash is inevitable, a storm that will test the church's strength, its ability to survive its own leaders. You step back, the night air crisp against your skin, and glance at the palace. Its windows aglow with the flicker of torchlight. The music has faded, replaced by the tense whispers of those inside, bracing for what's next. You feel the weight of this moment, as if Rome itself is holding its breath, waiting to see if Alexander VI will fall to his enemies or his own vices. You think of the popes who will follow, some as flawed, others striving to redeem the throne. The church's journey is one of stumbles and recoveries, of men who betray it and those who save it. You take a deep breath, the scent of jasmine from a nearby garden mingling with the smoke of Rome's forges. The bell tolls once more, its sound fading into the night. A gentle nudge to continue. You turn toward a narrow street, the shadows beckoning, have ready to step deeper into the saga of these wayward popes, where the throne of St. Peter remains a prize, a burden, and a test of faith. Part 7. The white tyrant you street, and in a shadowed corner of Rome, where the flickering light from torches on the stone walls glimmers on stagnant puddles, reflecting the star-strewn night sky. The acrid smell of smoke from nearby forges mingles with the faint murmur of prayers drifting from a small church. It's 1,300 and 78, and Rome trembles with division, not just among its noble families, but within the Church itself. Remember how Alexander VI turned the Vatican into a gilded empire for the Borgia family? Well, you're about to meet a man dangerous in a different way. Urban VI, a brutal pope who plunged the Church into the Great Western Schism through paranoia and cruelty. The air feels heavy, as if the city is bracing for a coming storm. You slip into a secret passage leading to the Vatican Palace, where the scent of burning incense fails to mask the odor of sweat and tension. Candlelight dances across stone walls carved with sacred motifs, but it can't dispel the pervasive fear. A historical truth. Urban VI, born Bartolomeo Prigiano, became pope in 1378 after a pressured election, where cardinals, intimidated by Rome's powerful mob, chose an Italian to appease the crowd. This wasn't a triumph of faith, it was a rushed political decision. And Urban, our former archbishop, quickly revealed his authoritarian nature. You overhear a cardinal whispering to a servant. He doesn't lead, he commands. A light joke, if Urban VI had a modern nickname, it'd probably be Pope No Feedback Allowed. You step into a grand hall, where torchlight flickers over tattered tapestries and faded frescoes, their colours dulled by neglect. At the centre, Urban VI on a carved wooden throne, his pristine white papal robes stark against his face. Flushed with rage, his eyes are cold and piercing, scanning the room for traitors. Around him, cardinals stand silent, their gazes fixed on the floor to avoid his scrutiny. A strange detail: Urban was accused of physically striking his staff for minor errors, like spilling wine or misquoting a prayer. You spot a young servant, pale as moonlight, hurrying with a trembling tray of wine, his hands shaking as if he fears punishment. You shake your head, wondering how such a man holds the Church's highest office. You edge closer, the smoky scent of burning logs from a nearby brazier catching your senses. The hall's warmth wraps around you, but it's stifling, laced with unease. Urban's voice erupts, berating a cardinal for alleged disloyalty. You hear him roar, "You're all vipers, plotting to steal my throne." The words echo like a war cry, sharp and venomous. His hands, calloused from years as a cleric, clench the throne's armrests, his knuckles white. You notice the cardinal's tense postures, their robes rustling as they shift, whispering prayers or curses under their breath. The scene feels like a courtroom, with Urban as both judge and executioner, his paranoia a tangible force. You pose, your boots scuffing the stone floor, the sound swallowed by the hall's oppressive silence. You think of the Church, meant to unite the faithful, now a stage for Urban's tyranny. The contrast with Alexander VI's calculated greed is stark. Yet both have twisted the Church's mission into something personal, something dark. You imagine pilgrims beyond these walls, kneeling in candlelit chapels, their prayers a faint whisper against Urban's wrath. Their faith endures, a quiet miracle amidst his cruelty, a testament to a Church greater than its flawed leaders. You feel a pang of sympathy for them, yearning for a pope who embodies compassion, not control. You move closer to Urban's throne, the scent of burning wood growing stronger, its warmth almost oppressive. His voice, sharp and unyielding, cuts through the hall as he accuses another cardinal of treachery. You notice the fear in the cardinal's eyes, his hands trembling as he protests his loyalty. Urban's advisors, a mix of loyalists and opportunists, stand in a tense semicircle, their faces etched with worry. You hear whispers of Urban's growing paranoia, his belief that the French cardinals are plotting his downfall. The Vatican, once a sanctuary, is now a fortress, its walls pulsing with his ruthless ambition. You leave the hall, stepping into a dark corridor where Urban's shouts are drowned out by the anxious murmurs of his advisors. The air is cooler here, but it carries a weight, as if the palace is holding its breath. You hear them discuss Urban's escalating suspicions, his conviction that the French cardinals are conspiring against him. Then, if you learn he's acted a group of cardinals, has been arrested, locked in the Vatican's dank dungeons. A light joke to ease the mood if Urban VI threw a party. The guest list would only include those too terrified to decline. You feel the atmosphere thicken as you hear of the cardinals' fate, some tortured, their screams echoing through stone walls, others starved, and 5 executed without trial. You stand in a small chamber, where Urban meets his loyal allies. A single candle's light casts stark shadows on their tense faces. You hear him order increased security, as if all of Rome is against him. A strange detail some sources claim: Urban publicly humiliated cardinals during ceremonies, branding them traitors before the people. True or fabricated, no one knows for sure. But it fits the image of a man who sees the throne as a battlefield. You feel the air grow heavy as his allies nod, but their eyes betray unease. The room feels like a war council, not a holy conclave, its walls seeming to close in with the weight of Urban's folly. You pose, your boots scuffing the stone floor, the sound swallowed by the low hum of voices. The chamber's air is thick, the scent of wax and fear mingling in a cloying haze. You think back to the Vatican's grandeur, now a mockery of its sacred purpose, and wonder how the faithful endure. Pilgrims beyond these walls still pray, their devotion a fragile thread stretched thin by scandals like this. You imagine them huddled in Rome's churches, clutching rosaries, hoping for a pope who embodies faith, not fear. The contrast is stark, their quiet piety against Urban's brutal reign. You feel a pang of sympathy for those who look to the church for guidance, only to find a man more interested in power than salvation. You move closer to Urban's chair, the scent of his sweat-soaked robe cutting through the room's staleness. His voice is sharp, issuing orders with the frenzy of a man possessed. You notice the nervous glances of his allies, their faces etched with worry. They know Rome is a tinderbox, and Urban's actions are a lit match. You hear whispers of his political blunders, not just the arrests, but his alienation of the French cardinals, who hold sway in Avignon. The church's unity is fraying, and Urban's paranoia threatens to unravel it completely. You wonder if he even cares, or if the throne is just a stage for his vendetta, a fleeting prize to be wielded, not cherished. Suddenly, you hear the hurried patter of footsteps from the corridor. A messenger bursts in, reporting that a group of cardinals has fled and declared a rival pope, Clement VII, in Avignon. This marks the start of the Great Western Schism, a crisis that will divide Europe between 2, even 3, popes for nearly 40 years. The room falls silent, save for the candle's faint crackle. Urban, his face flushed with fury, orders Clement excommunicated. Along with his supporters, you catch the rage in his eyes, as if he's ready to burn Europe to keep his throne. You wonder, does he realize his cruelty has pushed the church to the abyss? You leave the chamber, stepping into a courtyard where moonlight bathes cracked stone statues in a ghostly glow. The church bells toll, but they bring no peace. Urban VI has turned the church into a battlefield, where faith is traded for suspicion, violence, and division. You feel a chill as you ponder his legacy, a church torn apart, a Europe fractured, and a throne stripped of its sanctity. A final light joke if Urban VI had a tombstone. It'd read Pope of Wrath, not love. You take a deep breath, ready to step further into the story, where more wayward popes await to reveal their darker secrets. You linger in the courtyard, the cobblestones cold beneath your boots, their uneven surfaces a map of Rome's turbulent past. The stars above burn bright, silent witnesses to the drama unfolding below. You think of the church, meant to be a beacon of faith, now a playground for urban's tyranny. You recall the pilgrims beyond these walls, their prayers rising like smoke, undeterred by his scandals. Their faith is a quiet miracle, a testament to something greater than the men who fail it. You wonder how long they can endure, how many more popes like Urban they can withstand before their trust frays. You wander toward a small fountain, its water gurgling softly, reflecting the moonlight in shimmering ripples. You dip your fingers into the cool stream, feeling the gentle current, a reminder that even in chaos, life flows on. The scent of damp earth and distant forges grounds you as you reflect on Urban's reign. He's not just a pope, he's a warning, a lesson in what happens when paranoia consumes the sacred. You think of the schism, its shadow looming over Europe, a fracture born of Urban's brutality. The clash was inevitable, a storm that tested the church's strength, its ability to survive its own leaders. You step back, the night air crisp against your skin, and glance at the palace. Its windows aglow with the flicker of torchlight. The whispers have faded, replaced by the tense silence of those inside. Bracing for what's next, you feel the weight of this moment, as if Rome itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what comes after Urban VI's reign. You think of the popes who will follow, some as flawed, others striving to redeem the throne. The Church's journey is one of stumbles and recoveries, of men who betray it and those who save it. You take a deep breath, the scent of jasmine from a nearby garden mingling with the smoke of Rome's forges. The bell tolls once more, its sound fading into the night. A gentle nudge to continue. You turn toward a narrow street, the shadows beckoning, ready to step deeper into the saga of these wayward popes, where the throne of St. Peter remains a prize, a burden, and a test of faith. Part 8. The Peddler of Salvation. You stand in a secluded corner of Rome, where the flickering light from torches on the stone walls casts a warm glow across moss-covered surfaces, their green tendrils curling like whispered secrets. The delicate scent of jasmine from a nearby garden weaves through the air, mingling with the clear, lilting notes of a harp drifting from the Vatican palace. It's 1513, and Rome dazzles in the Renaissance's golden age, where art and culture soar to new heights, yet conceal a deep moral decay. Remember how Urban VI's brutality plunged the church into the storm of schism. Well, you're about to meet a man more refined, but no less destructive. Leo X, the Pope who sold indulgences, igniting the Reformation that shook Europe. The air is opulent yet heavy, as if the city is poised for a scandal to erupt. You slip into a stone-paved passage leading to the Vatican Palace, where the warm scent of beeswax from candles blends with the rich aroma of costly perfume. Candlelight bathes vibrant frescoes, freshly painted by masters like Raphael, their colours glowing with divine scenes. But they can't mask the undercurrent of greed. A historical truth. Leo X, born Giovanni de' Medici, became Pope in 1513, propelled by the wealth and influence of the Medici family, Florence's banking titans. He didn't ascend through deep faith, but through gold and connections. You overhear a cardinal whispering to a servant. He says God gave him the throne to enjoy. A light joke if Leo X had a vlog. Its title would probably be Poppin' Off in Style. You step into a lavish banquet hall, where crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across Persian rugs and tables laden with roasted meats, exotic fruits, and silver goblets brimming with wine. The air is thick with the scents of rosemary, saffron, and warm bread, a feast for the senses. At the center, Leo X lounges on a gilded throne, his papal robes draping his portly frame. His eyes sparkle with wit, but there's a shallowness to his gaze, a man more enamored with splendor than spirituality. Around him, artists, poets, and cardinals laugh and clink glasses, their voices a merry hum. A strange detail: Leo was notorious for his love of hunting, once leading a grand entourage into the forests with elephants and cheetahs, more like an emperor than a spiritual leader. You glance at a corner where a poet recites an ode to Leo, but the crowd's eyes are fixed on trays of gold coins, likely proceeds from indulgence sales. You shake your head, wondering how the church became such a gilded theatre. You edge closer, the sharp tang of red wine catching your senses, its aroma rising from goblets passed among the revelers. Leo's laughter booms, recounting a recent hunting tale, but you notice he avoids the gaze of an elderly bishop, who seems eager to discuss the church's finances. The bishop's hands fidget with a scroll, his brow furrowed, as if bearing bad news. You hear whispers that Leo has drained the Vatican's treasury on feasts, art, and the construction of St. Peter's Basilica, its half-built dome, a monument to his ambition to fill the coffers. He authorized the sale of indulgences, certificates, promising reduced punishment for sins in exchange for payment. Historians still debate whether Leo genuinely believed in the spiritual value of indulgences or saw them as a quick cash grab. Either way, you sense he's not here to save souls. He's here to sustain his lavish lifestyle. You pose, your boots sinking slightly into the plush rug, the hall's warmth enveloping you like a heavy cloak. The chandeliers murmur with secrets, their crystals catching the chaos like a glittering mirror. You think of the church, meant to guide the faithful, now a marketplace where salvation is sold. The contrast with Urban VI's violent paranoia is stark. Yet both have twisted the church's mission into something personal, something corrupt. You imagine pilgrims beyond these walls, clutching rosaries in dimly lit chapels, their prayers a faint whisper against the clink of coins. Their faith endures, a quiet miracle amidst Leo's excess, a testament to a church greater than its flawed leaders. You feel a pang of sympathy for them, yearning for a pope who embodies salvation, not commerce. You move closer to Leo's throne, the scent of wine growing stronger, its sweetness almost cloying. His voice, rich and jovial, cuts through the hall as he jests with a cardinal, his words laced with charm. You notice the calculated glances of his advisers, their robes rustling as they lean in, whispering of profits and patronage. You hear murmurs of indulgence, sales, of priests across Europe, peddling promises that when the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs. From peasants to merchants, people pour their savings into these assurances. But resentment simmers, a light joke to ease the mood. If Leo X knew modern advertising, he'd launch a campaign called Buy Indulgences. Get saved. You feel the atmosphere thicken as you hear of a German monk, Martin Luther, writing theses against indulgences, branding them blasphemy. You stand in a small chamber, where Leo meets his closest allies. A single candle's light casts stark shadows on their tense faces. You hear Leo laugh heartily, dismissing Luther as a drunken German who'll sober up. A strange detail: Leo once hosted a lavish ceremony to unveil an elephant gifted by Portugal's king, parading it through Rome while the poor went hungry. True or fabricated, no one knows for sure. but it fits the image of a man who sees the throne as a stage for spectacle. You feel the air grow heavy as his allies discuss how to handle Luther. But Leo shrugs, as if it's a minor nuisance. The room feels like a gilded cage, its walls pulsing with their misplaced confidence. You pose, your boots scuffing the stone floor, the sound swallowed by the low hum of voices. The chamber's air is thick, the scent of wax and fear mingling in a cloying haze. You think back to the Vatican's grandeur, now a mockery of its sacred purpose, and wonder how the faithful endure. Pilgrims beyond these walls still pray to their devotion, a fragile thread stretched thin by scandals like this. You imagine them huddled in Rome's churches, clutching rosaries, hoping for a pope who embodies faith, not extravagance. The contrast is stark, their quiet piety against Leo's ostentatious reign. You feel a pang of sympathy for those who look to the church for guidance, only to find a man more interested in gold than grace. You move closer to Leo's chair, the scent of his rosewater cologne cutting through the room's staleness. His voice is smooth, issuing orders with the ease of a seasoned banker. You notice the nervous glances of his allies, their faces etched with worry. They know Rome is a tinderbox, and Leo's actions are a lit match. You hear whispers of his financial blunders, not just indulgences, but loans from Medici banks, piling debt on the church. The faithful are growing restless, their trust fraying as they see their offerings vanish into Leo's feasts. You wonder if he even cares, or if the throne is just a stage for his spectacle, a fleeting prize to be enjoyed, not guarded. Suddenly, you hear the hurried patter of footsteps from the corridor. A messenger bursts in, reporting that Luther has nailed 95 theses to a church door in Wittenberg, calling for church reform. The room falls silent, save for the candle's faint crackle. Leo, his face briefly unsettled, orders Luther's excommunication, but you catch the anxiety in his advisor's eyes. You wonder, does he realize he's sparked a fire that will consume the church's unity? Not long after, you hear the Reformation's flames spread, splitting Europe into Catholic and Protestant. A final light joke, if Leo X had a tombstone, it reads sold indulgences. Lost Europe. You leave the chamber, stepping into a courtyard where moonlight bathes intricately carved stone statues in a silvery glow. The church bells toll, but they bring no peace. Leo X has turned the church into a money-making machine, where faith is traded for gold and pageantry. You feel a chill as you ponder his legacy, a fractured church, a divided Europe, and a throne stripped of its holiness. You take a deep breath, ready to step further into the story, where more wayward popes await to reveal their darker secrets. You linger in the courtyard, the cobblestones cool beneath your boots, their uneven surfaces a map of Rome's turbulent past. The stars above burn bright, silent witnesses to the drama unfolding below. You think of the church, meant to be a beacon of faith, now a marketplace for Leo's ambition. You recall the pilgrims beyond these walls, their prayers rising like smoke, undeterred by his scandals. Their faith is a quiet miracle, a testament to something greater than the men who fail it. You wonder how long they can endure, how many more popes like Leo they can withstand before their trust frays. You wander toward a small fountain, its water gurgling softly, reflecting the moonlight in shimmering ripples. You dip your fingers into the cool stream, feeling the gentle current, a reminder that even in chaos, life flows on. The scent of damp earth and distant forges grounds you as you reflect on Leo's reign. He's not just a pope, he's a warning, a lesson in what happens when faith is subordinated to luxury. You think of Luther, his theses, a spark that will reshape the world, a challenge born of Leo's greed. The clash was inevitable, a storm that tested the Church's strength, its ability to survive its own leaders. You step back, the night air crisp against your skin, and glance at the palace. Its windows aglow with the flicker of torchlight. The music has faded, replaced by the tense silence of those inside. Bracing for what's next, you feel the weight of this moment, as if Rome itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what comes after Leo X's reign. You think of the popes who will follow, some as flawed, others striving to redeem the throne. The Church's journey is one of stumbles and recoveries, of men who betray it and those who save it. You take a deep breath, the scent of jasmine from a nearby garden mingling with the smoke of Rome's forges. The bell tolls once more, its sound fading into the night. A gentle nudge to continue. You turn toward a narrow street, the shadows beckoning, ready to step deeper into the saga of these wayward popes, where the throne of Saint Peter remains a prize, a burden, and a test of faith. Part 9. Self-proclaimed God. You stand in a shadowed corner of Rome, where the flickering light from torches on the stone walls casts dancing shadows across moss-covered bricks, their patterns weaving tales of ancient secrets. The acrid smell of smoke from nearby forges blends with the faint murmur of prayers drifting from a small church, but the tolling of its bell carries an uneasy edge. It's 1294, and Rome trembles with power struggles, where the throne of Saint Peter has become a symbol of personal ambition. Remember how Leo X turned indulgences into a commodity, sparking the Reformation well. You're about to meet a man even more arrogant, Boniface VIII, the Pope who declared himself an emperor, only to be humiliated by the King of France. The air feels oppressive, as if the city is bracing for a storm of power to erupt. You slip into a narrow passage leading to the Lateran Palace, where the scent of burning incense struggles to mask the odor of sweat and tension. Candlelight flickers across stone walls, etched with sacred motifs. But it can't dispel the suffocating atmosphere. A historical truth. Boniface VIII, born Benedetto Caetani, became Pope in 1294 after his predecessor, Celestine V, abdicated, a rare act in church history. Boniface, Unraveled, seized the throne with ambitions to make the Church Europe's supreme power. You overhear a cardinal whispering to a servant. He doesn't just want to rule the Church, he wants to rule the world. A light joke if Boniface VIII had a motto. It'd probably be Saint Peter's throne, throne of the gods. You step into a grand hall, where torchlight dances across lavish tapestries and frescoes depicting saints, their serene faces at odds with the tension below. At the center, Boniface VIII sits on a gilded throne, his papal robes draping his gaunt frame. His eyes are sharp, assessing every soul in the room with a predator's gaze. Around him, cardinals and envoys from kingdoms stand silent, their eyes averted to avoid his scrutiny. A strange detail: Boniface once donned an emperor's cloak and wore 2 crowns, one papal, one regal, in a ceremony, proclaiming, "I am Caesar. I am emperor." You glance at a corner where a French envoy whispers to a cardinal, their faces etched with worry. You shake your head, wondering how such a man dares to place himself on par with the divine. You edge closer, the warm scent of beeswax from the candles filling your senses. Its sweetness, a stark contrast to the hall's unease. Boniface's voice resonates as he reads a decree, each word delivered with the authority of a king. You hear him proclaim unam sanctum, a bull asserting that all souls must submit to the Pope for salvation. The parchment rustles in his hands, its weight as heavy as his ambition. His advisors, clad in crimson robes, nod solemnly, but their tight-lipped expressions betray doubt. You notice the hall's opulence, golden candelabras, silk drapes, yet it feels hollow. A stage for Boniface's ego rather than faith. The air hums with his audacity, as if the walls themselves are straining under his hubris. You pose, your boots scuffing the polished marble floor, the sound swallowed by the hall's oppressive silence. You think of the church, meant to guide the faithful. Now, a platform for Boniface's grandeur. The contrast with Leo X's gilded excess is stark. Yet both have twisted the church's mission into something personal, something corrupt. You imagine pilgrims beyond these walls, kneeling in candlelit chapels. Their prayers, a faint whisper against Boniface's decrees. Their faith endures, a quiet miracle amidst his arrogance, a testament to a church greater than its flawed leaders. You feel a pang of sympathy for them, yearning for a pope who embodies humility, not hegemony. You move closer to Boniface's throne, the scent of beeswax growing stronger, its warmth almost cloying. His voice, commanding and unyielding, cuts through the hall as he dismisses a cardinal's cautious advice. You notice the fear in the cardinal's eyes, his hands trembling as he retreats. Boniface's allies, a mix of loyalists and opportunists, stand in a tense semicircle, their faces etched with worry. You hear murmurs of his clash with King Philip IV of France. A cold and ambitious ruler, Boniface banned Philip from taxing French clergy, and Philip retaliated by accusing Boniface of heresy, adultery, and even sorcery. A light joke to ease the tension. If Boniface and Philip had a social media feud, the hashtag would be number Pope vs King. You feel the atmosphere thicken as you hear of Philip's plan a strike against the papacy itself. You leave the hall, stepping into a dark corridor where Boniface's decree echoes, drowned out by the anxious whispers of his advisors. The air is cooler here, but it carries a weight, as if the palace is holding its breath. You hear them discuss Boniface's escalating feud with Philip, his refusal to yield to the French crown. The corridor's stone walls seem to pulse with their fear, their shadows flickering like ghosts of past mistakes. You learn that Philip's allies are plotting a bold move, one that could shake the church to its core. The tension is palpable, a storm brewing just beyond the horizon, its thunder already rumbling in the distance. You stand in a small chamber where Boniface meets his loyal allies. A single candle's light casts stark shadows on their tense faces, their eyes darting nervously. You hear him order Philip's excommunication, his voice booming with defiance, banning the king from church rites. A strange detail, some sources claim, Boniface held lavish ceremonies to flaunt his power, donning imperial robes and demanding envoys kneel before him. True or fabricated, no one knows for sure. But it fits the image of a man who sees the throne as a symbol of supremacy. You feel the air grow heavy as his allies nod, but their eyes betray unease. The room feels like a war council, not a holy conclave. Its walls seeming to close in with the weight of Boniface's folly. You pose, your boots scuffing the stone floor, the sound swallowed by the low hum of voices. The chamber's air is thick, the scent of wax and fear mingling in a cloying haze. You think back to the Lateran's sanctity, now a mockery of its sacred purpose, and wonder how the faithful endure. Pilgrims beyond these walls still pray, their devotion a fragile thread stretched thin by scandals like this. You imagine them huddled in Rome's churches, clutching rosaries, hoping for a pope who embodies faith, not pride. The contrast is stark, their quiet piety against Boniface's grandiose reign. You feel a pang of sympathy for those who look to the church for guidance, only to find a man more interested in power than salvation. You move closer to Boniface's chair, the scent of his myrrh-scented robe cutting through the room's staleness. His voice is sharp, issuing orders with the confidence of a monarch. You notice the nervous glances of his allies, their faces etched with worry. They know Rome is a tinderbox, and Boniface's actions are a lit match. You hear whispers of his political blunders, not just with Philip, but with other rulers alienated by his arrogance. The church's influence is fraying, and Boniface's hubris threatens to unravel it completely. You wonder if he even cares, or if the throne is just a stage for his divine pretensions, a fleeting prize to be wielded, not cherished. Suddenly, you hear the hurried patter of footsteps from the corridor. A messenger bursts in, reporting that a band of soldiers, led by Philip's allies, is marching on Anagni, where Boniface resides. The room falls silent, save for the candle's faint crackle. Boniface, his face paling but still defiant, orders preparations to resist. You catch the challenge in his eyes, as if he believes himself invincible. But soon, you hear that the soldiers stormed the palace, striking Boniface across the face, a slap, not just to him, but to the church's authority. He was held captive for 3 days, humiliated before being released. The wound to his pride, never healing. You leave the chamber, stepping into a courtyard where moonlight bathes cracked stone statues in a ghostly glow. The church bells toll, but they bring no peace. Boniface VIII died soon after, in 1303, perhaps from illness or rage, leaving a humiliated church. You feel a chill as you ponder his legacy, a disgraced throne, a weakened church, and a tale that led Dante to place him in hell's circle for the corrupt. A final light joke, if Boniface VIII had a tombstone. It had read, "Claimed to be a god." Slapped back to reality. You take a deep breath, ready to step further into the story, where more wayward popes await to reveal their darker secrets. You linger in the courtyard, the cobblestones cold beneath your boots, their uneven surfaces a map of Rome's turbulent past. The stars above burn bright, silent witnesses to the drama unfolding below. You think of the church, meant to be a beacon of faith, now a stage for Boniface's arrogance. You recall the pilgrims beyond these walls, their prayers rising like smoke, undeterred by his scandals. Their faith is a quiet miracle, a testament to something greater than the men who fail it. You wonder how long they can endure, how many more popes like Boniface they can withstand before their trust frays. You wander toward a small fountain, its water gurgling softly, reflecting the moonlight in shimmering ripples. You dip your fingers into the cool stream, feeling the gentle current, a reminder that even in chaos, life flows on. The scent of damp earth and distant forges grounds you as you reflect on Boniface's reign. He's not just a pope, he's a warning, a lesson in what happens when pride consumes the sacred. You think of Philip, his audacious strike, a blow that humbled the papacy, a challenge born of Boniface's hubris. The clash was inevitable, a storm that tested the church's strength, its ability to survive its own leaders. You step back, the night air crisp against your skin, and glance at the palace. Its windows aglow with the flicker of torchlight. The whispers have faded, replaced by the tense silence of those inside. Reeling from Boniface's fall, you feel the weight of this moment, as if Rome itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what comes next. You think of the popes who will follow, some as flawed, others striving to redeem the throne. The church's journey is one of stumbles and recoveries, of men who betray it, and those who save it. You take a deep breath, the scent of jasmine from a nearby garden, mingling with the smoke of Rome's forges. The bell tolls once more, its sound fading into the night. A gentle nudge to continue. You turn toward a narrow street, the shadows beckoning, ready to step deeper into the saga of these wayward popes, where the throne of Saint Peter remains a prize, a burden, and a test of faith. Part 10. Crusades of Blood. You stand in a shadowed corner of Rome, where the flickering light from torches on the stone walls casts trembling shadows across moss-covered bricks, as if whispering tales of war. The scent of burning incense from a nearby church mingles with the distant clatter of hooves and the metallic clang of armor. It's 1198, and Rome pulses with a hunger for power, where the throne of Saint Peter has become a banner for holy wars. Remember how Boniface VIII's divine pretensions led to his humiliation by France's king? Well, you're about to meet a man even more formidable, Innocent III. The Pope who launched blood-soaked crusades, turning faith into a weapon of slaughter. The air feels heavy, as if the city is bracing for the roar of war. You slip into a stone-paved passage leading to the Lateran Palace, where the warm scent of beeswax from candles blends with the earthy aroma of leather-bound parchment scrolls stacked on tables. Candlelight bathes stone walls, etched with sacred carvings. But it can't mask the pervasive tension. A historical truth. Innocent III, born Lotario dei Conti di Segni, became Pope in 1198 at age 37. One of the youngest and most powerful popes in history. He ascended with ambitions to strengthen the Church's authority, not just through faith, but through the sword. You overhear a cardinal whispering to a servant. He doesn't just want to guide souls, he wants to command kingdoms. A light joke if Innocent III had a LinkedIn profile. His top skill would be crusade planning, instead of bestowing blessings. You step into a grand hall, where candlelight flickers across lavish tapestries and frescoes depicting holy warriors, their swords raised in divine fury. At the center, Innocent III sits on a carved wooden throne, his papal robes draping his slender frame. His eyes are sharp, piercing through every plot with a scholar's precision. Around him, cardinals, envoys, and knights stand silent, awaiting his words. A strange detail, Innocent held public prayer ceremonies to rally knights for the Crusades, yet also ordered the burning of those deemed heretics. You glance at a corner, where an envoy presents a parchment scroll detailing military plans. While a bishop murmurs of God's will, you shake your head, wondering how such a man turned faith into a call for war. You edge closer, the musty scent of aged parchment catching your senses, its faint tang grounding you in the hall's gravity. Innocent's voice resonates as he reads a letter, urging Europe's kings to join the Fourth Crusade to reclaim the Holy Land. The parchment rustles in his hands, each word heavy with purpose. His advisors, clad in crimson robes, nod solemnly, but their tight-lipped expressions betray doubt. You notice the hall's austerity wooden benches, iron candelabras, yet it feels charged. A war room disguised as a sanctuary. You hear whispers of Innocent's other target, the heretics within Europe, particularly the Cathars in southern France. Historians still debate whether Innocent truly believed the Crusades were God's will, or used them to bolster church power against kingdoms and rival sects. Either way, you sense he's not here to heal, he's here to conquer. Whatever the cost in blood. You pose, your boots scuffing the stone floor, the sound swallowed by the hall's solemn hush. You think of the church, meant to unite the faithful, now a rallying cry for slaughter. The contrast with Boniface VIII's hubris is stark. Yet both have twisted the Church's mission into something personal, something destructive. You imagine pilgrims beyond these walls, kneeling in candlelit chapels, their prayers, a faint whisper against the clash of swords. Their faith endures, a quiet miracle amidst Innocent's wars. a testament to a church greater than its flawed leaders. You feel a pang of sympathy for them, yearning for a pope who embodies peace, not conquest. You move closer to Innocent's throne, the scent of parchment growing stronger, its earthy notes mingling with the hall's warmth. His voice, measured yet commanding, cuts through the silence as he dismisses a cardinal's cautious advice. You notice the intensity in his eyes, a blend of zeal and calculation, as if he sees himself as God's chosen instrument. His advisors, a mix of clerics and warriors, stand in a tense semicircle, their faces etched with worry. You hear murmurs of the Fourth Crusade, already veering off course. You learn it never reached the Holy Land, instead sacking Constantinople, a Christian city, in 1204, looting churches and massacring its people. A cardinal whispers. Innocent claims he's horrified, but he kept the spoils. A light joke to ease the tension. If Innocent III had a YouTube channel, his video would be titled, Crusade Wrong Turn. Still winning, you leave the hall, stepping into a dark corridor where Innocent's letter echoes, drowned out by the anxious whispers of his advisors. The air is cooler here, but it carries a weight, as if the palace is holding its breath. You hear them discuss the Fourth Crusade's failure, its betrayal of Christian unity, and Innocent's pivot to another war, the Albigensian Crusade against the Cathars. You catch the chilling command, kill them all. God will know his own. The corridor's stone walls seem to pulse with their fear, their shadows flickering like ghosts of the fallen. You feel the atmosphere thicken, a storm of blood and fire brewing across Europe, its embers already glowing in the distance. You stand in a small chamber, where Innocent meets his closest allies. A single candle's light casts stark shadows on their tense faces, their eyes darting nervously. You hear him order troops to southern France, where the city of Béziers was massacred in 1209, with over 20,000 slain, Cathar and Catholic alike. A strange detail, some sources claim Innocent held victory ceremonies, thanking God for eradicating heresy, while the people mourned. True or fabricated, no one knows for sure. But it fits the image of a man who sees war as faith's tool. You feel the air grow heavy as his allies nod, but their eyes betray unease. The room feels like a war council, not a holy conclave, its walls seeming to close in with the weight of Innocent's zeal. You pose, your boots scuffing the stone floor, the sound swallowed by the low hum of voices. The chamber's air is thick, the scent of wax and fear mingling in a cloying haze. You think back to the Lateran's sanctity, now a mockery of its sacred purpose, and wonder how the faithful endure. Pilgrims beyond these walls still pray, their devotion a fragile thread stretched thin by scandals like this. You imagine them huddled in Rome's churches, clutching rosaries, hoping for a pope who embodies mercy, not massacre. The contrast is stark, their quiet piety against Innocent's bloody campaigns. You feel a pang of sympathy for those who look to the church for guidance, only to find a man more interested in conquest than compassion. You move closer to Innocent's chair, the scent of his cedar-scented robe cutting through the room's staleness. His voice is steady, issuing orders with the confidence of a general. You notice the nervous glances of his allies, their faces etched with worry. They know Europe is a tinderbox, and Innocent's actions are a lit match. You hear whispers of his strategic blunders, not just the Crusades, but his excommunication of kings who defy him, alienating allies. The Church's moral authority is fraying, and Innocent's zeal threatens to unravel it completely. You wonder if he even cares, or if the throne is just a stage for his divine mission, a fleeting prize to be wielded, not cherished. Suddenly, you hear the hurried patter of footsteps from the corridor. A messenger bursts in, reporting the atrocities at Béziers. But Innocent merely shrugs, as if it's the price of righteousness. The room falls silent. Save for the candle's faint crackle, you catch the coldness in his eyes, as if he believes every death serves God's plan. You wonder, does he realize his crusades have sown seeds of division and suffering? Laying the groundwork for the later Inquisition, the air feels electric, as if the palace is a powder keg, awaiting a spark. You leave the chamber, stepping into a courtyard where moonlight bathes cracked stone statues in a ghostly glow. The church bells toll, but they bring no peace. Innocent III has turned the church into a war machine, where faith is traded for blood, fire, and power. You feel a chill as you ponder his legacy, a church strengthened yet stained by blood, a wounded Europe, and a throne sullied by violence. A final light joke if Innocent III had a tombstone. It had read, "Brought the sword," not the cross. You take a deep breath, ready to step further into the story, where the consequences of these wayward popes await exploration. You linger in the courtyard, the cobblestones cold beneath your boots, their uneven surfaces a map of Rome's turbulent past. The stars above burn bright, silent witnesses to the drama unfolding below. You think of the church, meant to be a beacon of faith, now a rallying cry for Innocent's wars. You recall the pilgrims beyond these walls, their prayers rising like smoke, undeterred by his scandals. Their faith is a quiet miracle, a testament to something greater than the men who fail it. You wonder how long they can endure, how many more popes like Innocent they can withstand before their trust frays. You wander toward a small fountain, its water gurgling softly, reflecting the moonlight in shimmering ripples. You dip your fingers into the cool stream, feeling the gentle current, a reminder that even in chaos, life flows on. The scent of damp earth and distant forges grounds you as you reflect on Innocent's reign. He's not just a pope, he's a warning, a lesson in what happens when faith is weaponized. You think of the Crusades, their blood-soaked path, a scar on Europe, a tragedy born of Innocent's zeal. The clash was inevitable, a storm that tested the church's strength, its ability to survive its own leaders. You step back, the night air crisp against your skin, and glance at the palace. Its windows aglow with the flicker of torchlight. The whispers have faded, replaced by the tense silence of those inside. Reeling from Innocent's wars, you feel the weight of this moment, as if Rome itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what comes next. You think of the popes who will follow, some as flawed, others striving to redeem the throne. The church's journey is one of stumbles and recoveries, of men who betray it and those who save it. You take a deep breath, the scent of jasmine from a nearby garden mingling with the smoke of Rome's forges. The bell tolls once more, its sound fading into the night. A gentle nudge to continue. You turn toward a narrow street, the shadows beckoning, ready to step deeper into the saga of these wayward popes, where the throne of St. Peter remains a prize, a burden, and a test of faith. Part 11. The Cost of Corruption. You stand in a shadowed corner of Rome, where the flickering light from torches on the stone walls casts long, wavering shadows across the cobblestones. The air carries the scent of damp earth from the Tiber River, mingling with the faint murmur of prayers drifting from a nearby chapel. It's 1216, and Rome is still reeling from the echoes of war and scandal, where the throne of St. Peter has become a stage for ambition and betrayal. Remember how Innocent III turned faith into a weapon, staining the church with the blood of Crusades? Well, now you're about to step back and see the cost of all these corrupt popes. From orgies to executions, and how their actions fractured the church and the faith of millions. The air feels heavy, as if the city is holding its breath, waiting for the wounds to heal or tear open again. You slip through a narrow alley leading to a quiet courtyard outside the Vatican, where the scent of incense lingers, barely masking the tension in the air. The moonlight spills over the cracked statues, their marble faces seeming to judge the chaos that has unfolded. A historical truth, the period from the 10th to the 13th centuries, often called the Dark Age of the Papacy, saw a string of popes whose corruption, John XII's debauchery, Benedict XIX's greed, Stephen VI's madness, and others weakened the Church's moral authority, leading to schisms and loss of trust among the faithful. You overhear a monk whispering to a merchant, "The Church is a shepherd, but its leaders have become wolves." A light joke, if these popes had a group chat. It'd probably be called How to Ruin a Holy Throne 101. You step into the courtyard, where a small group of pilgrims gathers, their faces weary from long journeys. The cobblestones under your feet are uneven, worn by centuries of footsteps. You notice their tattered cloaks and the flicker of doubt in their eyes as they speak of the Church. One pilgrim, clutching a rosary, mutters about the taxes demanded by the clergy, funds meant for crusades, but often lining the pockets of popes like Leo X. Another speaks of the Great Western Schism, sparked by Urban VI's tyranny, which left Europe torn between rival popes for decades. You feel the weight of their disillusionment, as if the Church, meant to be a beacon of hope, has become a labyrinth of greed. A strange detail during this period: some villages stopped sending tithes to Rome, choosing instead to support local priests. Believing the Vatican had lost its divine mandate, you shake your head, wondering how faith could survive such betrayal. You move closer to the group, and the scent of their unwashed clothes mixes with the crisp night air. The pilgrims' voices grow heated as they recount tales of corruption. One tells of Alexander VI's Borgia dynasty, whose poison and parties turned the Vatican into a den of intrigue. Another mentions Benedict IX, who sold the papacy like a market trinket, plunging the Church into chaos, with 3 popes claiming the throne at once. Historians still debate whether these scandals permanently damaged the Church's spiritual authority or merely exposed its human flaws, forcing it to evolve. Whatever the truth, you sense that the faithful are paying the price, their trust eroded by men who wore the papal crown but acted like tyrants. You leave the courtyard, stepping into a dimly lit street where the clatter of a passing cart drowns out the pilgrims' voices. The air feels colder now, and you pull your cloak tighter. You hear whispers of rebellion not just in Rome, but across Europe. In Germany, Martin Luther's 95 Theses, sparked by Leo X's indulgences, are spreading like wildfire, calling for reform and splitting Christendom. In France, the Albigensian Crusade, ordered by Innocent III, left entire regions scarred, breeding resentment toward the Church. A light joke: if the Church were a business, these popes would have tanked its Yelp rating with all their 1-star reviews. You feel the tension in the air, as if the Church is a ship taking on water, its hull cracked by centuries of corruption. You pause outside a small tavern, where a group of scholars debates in hushed tones. The scent of ale and wood smoke wafts out as you listen. One scholar argues that the Church's wealth, amassed through indulgences and taxes, alienated the poor, who saw their offerings vanish into papal feasts. Another points to the schisms, like the one caused by Urban VI, which confused kings and peasants alike, forcing them to choose between rival popes. A peculiar detail: in some regions, people began praying to saints for protection, not just from disease, but from the Church itself. Believing it had strayed from God's path, you feel a pang of sadness, realizing that the institution meant to unite has instead sown division. Suddenly, you hear the clatter of boots as a messenger rushes past, carrying news of a council being called to address the church's crises. You follow him to a grand square, where clergy and nobles gather under torchlight. Their faces are grim, and you sense their desperation to restore order. The messenger speaks of efforts to reform the church, to curb the excesses of popes like Alexander VI and Boniface VIII. But you also hear whispers of resistance from those who profit from the status quo. The church is at a crossroads, and you wonder if it can rebuild trust after so much damage. A final light joke: if these reformers had a slogan, it'd be fixing the church. One scandal at a time, you step back into the square, where the moonlight bathes the ancient stones in a soft glow. The bells of St. Peter's ring faintly, but they sound mournful, echoing the pain of a fractured faith. You feel a chill of the night deepen. As you reflect on the legacy of these corrupt popes, a church weakened, a Europe divided, and a people yearning for something pure amidst the corruption. The cost of their actions lingers, like a shadow over Rome, and you wonder what it will take to heal the wounds. You take a deep breath, ready to step further into the story, where the faint glimmers of reform are waiting to be uncovered. Part 12. Silent reforms you street, and in a quiet plaza in Rome, where the soft glow of lanterns on the stone walls casts gentle shadows across the cobblestones, worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims' footsteps. The air carries the faint scent of olive oil from nearby kitchens, mingling with the distant hum of vespers from a small chapel. It's 1216, and Rome is a city caught between its glorious past and a troubled present, still scarred by the corrupt popes who turned the throne of St. Peter into a stage for greed and violence. Remember how the scandals of Innocent III and others left the church fractured, its faithful doing well. Now you're about to meet the unsung heroes, the quiet reformers who worked in the shadows to mend a broken institution, their efforts often overshadowed by the louder sins of their predecessors. The air feels still, as if the city is holding its breath, hoping for redemption. You slip through a narrow archway leading to a modest cloister, where the scent of damp stone and wax candles fills the air. Moonlight filters through the arches, illuminating a group of monks bent over parchment scrolls, a historical truth in the wake of the church's darkest centuries. Figures like Saint Francis of Assisi and Saint Dominic emerged in the early 13th century. Founding mendicant orders the Franciscans and Dominicans to restore the church's spiritual mission through poverty, preaching, and service. Their work laid the groundwork for reform, countering the excesses of popes like Leo X and Alexander VI. You overhear a young monk whispering to another, "We don't need gold to serve God." A light joke: if St. Francis had a business card, it'd probably just say, "Loves God." Hates fancy robes. You step closer, your footsteps soft on the stone floor. The monks' faces are lit by candlelight, their expressions earnest as they discuss ways to reach the poor, who've grown wary of a church that demands tithes but offers little comfort. You notice their simple brown robes, a stark contrast to the gilded vestments of popes like Boniface VIII. One monk speaks of St. Francis, who abandoned wealth to live among the destitute, preaching love and humility. His example inspired thousands, drawing people back to a faith that felt authentic. A strange detail: Francis was known to preach to birds and wolves, believing all creatures deserved God's word, a quirk that charmed peasants but baffled the Vatican's elite. You smile, imagining how out of place he must have seemed in a Rome obsessed with power. You move through the cloister, the scent of ink and parchment lingering as you pass a table strewn with letters. These reformers aren't just monks, they're scholars and priests who dare to question the church's path. You hear of Saint Dominic, whose order focused on education and combating heresy through reason, not the bloodshed of Innocent III's Crusades. Their quiet work teaching, writing, and serving begins to chip away at the damage done by corrupt popes. Historians still debate whether these reformers could have prevented the Protestant Reformation if their influence had spread faster, or if the Church's wounds were already too deep. Whatever the truth, you feel a flicker of hope, as if these humble figures are planting seeds in a barren field. You leave the cloister, stepping into a bustling street where the clatter of carts and voices fills the air. The night is cool, and you pull your cloak tighter. You notice a small crowd gathered around a Franciscan friar preaching in the square. His words, simple but powerful, return to God, not to gold. The crowd listens, some nodding, others wiping tears. You realize that these reformers are doing what popes like Benedict IX never could. They're rebuilding trust, one sermon at a time. A light joke if these friars had a marketing campaign. It'd be Faith Now, with 100% less corruption. You sense the air lightening, as if the city is starting to breathe again. Stirred by the promise of change, you pause outside a modest scriptorium, where a group of reform-minded clergy meets in secret. The scent of vellum and candle wax wafts out as you listen. They speak of councils being proposed to address the Church's abuses, like the simony that allowed men like Alexander VI to buy their way to power. One priest mentions the need for stricter rules on papal elections to prevent another John XII. A peculiar detail some reformers suggested, that popes should take vows of poverty, an idea quickly squashed by the Vatican's wealthier cardinals, who preferred their silk robes. You feel a pang of frustration, realizing that reform is a slow, uphill battle against entrenched power. Suddenly, you hear the soft tread of sandals as a messenger approaches, carrying news of a new papal decree supporting the mendicant orders. The clergy exchange hopeful glances, but their voices remain cautious. They know the Church's recovery will take decades, perhaps centuries, and that the scars of the past schisms, Crusades, and scandals still linger. The room falls silent. Save for the crackle of the candle flame, you sense their determination, like a quiet fire burning beneath the surface, ready to reshape the Church from within. A final light joke, if these reformers had a team name, it'd be the clean-up crew, fixing the mess one prayer at a time. You step back into the street, where the moonlight bathes the ancient stones in a silver glow. The chapel bells ring softly, their sound carrying a hint of promise. You feel a warmth despite the cool night. As you reflect on these quiet reformers, men and women who chose service over splendor, faith over fortune, their work is a faint light in the darkness left by corrupt popes, a reminder that even a broken institution can begin to heal. You take a deep breath, ready to step further into the story, where the Church's slow rebirth awaits. Part 13, Church Reborn You Street, and in a quiet plaza in Rome, where the soft glow of lanterns on the ancient stone walls casts a warm, golden light across the cobblestones, worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims' footsteps. The air carries the faint scent of rosemary from a nearby herb garden, mingling with the distant toll of church bells, their chimes echoing with a newfound clarity. It's 1216, and Rome is stirring, slowly emerging from the shadows of its darkest centuries, where corrupt popes like Innocent III and Leo X nearly tore the Church apart. Remember those quiet reformers, the Franciscans and Dominicans, working tirelessly to mend a broken faith. Well, now you're about to see the Church begin to rise from its ashes, guided by cautious steps toward reform and a renewed sense of purpose. The air feels lighter, as if the city is exhaling after years of holding its breath. You slip through a narrow archway leading to a modest basilica, where the scent of beeswax candles and fresh incense fills the air. Moonlight streams through stained glass windows, painting the stone floor with colours that seem to dance with hope, a historical truth in the early 13th century. The Church began to stabilize through efforts like the Fourth Lateran Council of 1215, which addressed abuses such as simony, the buying and selling of church offices, and clarified doctrine, setting the stage for a stronger, more unified institution. These reforms, spurred by the groundwork of figures like Saint Francis of Assisi and Saint Dominic, helped restore some trust in the papacy. After the scandals of popes like Alexander VI and Benedict IX, you overhear a priest whispering to a scribe, "The Church is learning to walk again, one humble step at a time." A light joke: if the Church had a motivational poster back then, it'd say, "Keep calm and reform on." You step into the basilica, your footsteps soft on the cool stone floor, the echo swallowed by the vaulted ceiling above. The pews are filled with worshippers, their faces lit by the warm flicker of candlelight, a mix of hope and wariness in their eyes. You notice a young priest at the pulpit, his voice steady as he delivers a sermon, urging the congregation to embrace charity over greed, to seek God in simplicity rather than splendor. His plain woolen robe stands in stark contrast to the gilded vestments of popes like Leo X, whose indulgent sails sparked rebellion. Unlike the lavish displays of the Borgia era, this feels genuine, a return to the Church's roots as a shepherd for souls. You pause by a wooden bench, feeling the worn grain under your fingertips, and listen as the priest speaks of Saint Francis, who abandoned wealth to live among the poor, preaching love and humility. His example has spread like wildfire, drawing thousands back to a faith that feels authentic. Untainted by the corruption of men like John XII, a strange detail catches your ear. Francis was known to preach to birds and wolves, believing all creatures deserved God's word, a quirk that charmed peasants but baffled the Vatican's elite, who preferred their sermons in marble halls. You smile, imagining him standing in a muddy field, his voice carrying to a flock of sparrows, while cardinals in Rome rolled their eyes. This simplicity, this raw devotion, is what's breathing life back into the Church. You glance around the basilica, noting the modest wooden cross above the altar, a far cry from the jewel-encrusted relics pawned off by popes like Boniface VIII. The worshippers, from farmers in rough tunics to merchants in faded cloaks, seem to hang on the priest's words, their faces softening as he speaks of a church that serves, not rules. You feel a quiet warmth, as if the stones themselves are absorbing this new spirit. You move closer to the altar, the scent of frankincense wrapping around you like a gentle embrace. The priest's voice carries a quiet strength, weaving stories of Saint Dominic, whose order focused on education and combating heresy through reason, not the bloodshed of Innocent III's Crusades. You hear whispers of new popes, like Honorius III, who ascended in 1216 and supported these mendicant orders, encouraging their mission of poverty and preaching. These leaders, though not without flaws, are a far cry from the tyrants like Urban VI, whose paranoia sparked schisms, or the schemers like Alexander VI, who turned the Vatican into a family empire. Historians still debate whether these early reforms could have prevented the deeper splits of the Protestant Reformation, or if the Church's wounds carved by centuries of greed and violence were too deep to heal fully. Whatever the truth, you sense a spark of optimism, as if the Church is rediscovering its soul. One sermon at a time, you leave the basilica, stepping into a bustling square where the clatter of merchants' carts and the laughter of children fill the air. The night is crisp, and you pull your cloak tighter, Feeling the cool breeze against your cheeks, you notice a group of pilgrims sharing bread under a lantern. Their faces bright, with stories of local priests who live humbly. Inspired by the Franciscan model, one pilgrim, an old man with weathered hands, tells of a friar who rebuilt a village church with his own hands. Refusing payment, these small acts are knitting the church back together, restoring trust in places where popes like Benedict IX had shattered it with their greed. A light joke, if these priests had a tagline, it'd be less bling, more blessings. You feel the air warming, as if Rome is beginning to trust again. Stirred by the slow but steady work of reform, you pause outside a modest scriptorium, where a group of reformist clergy gathers in hushed discussion. The scent of parchment and ink wafts out as you lean closer, careful not to disturb them. Their voices are low but urgent, speaking of plans to educate priests more rigorously, ensuring they're scholars of faith, not pawns of politics like those appointed by popes such as Sergius III. One monk, his quill scratching across vellum, mentions the growing influence of universities in Paris and Bologna, where theology is being studied with a rigor that could prevent the doctrinal chaos of past centuries. You catch a glimpse of a manuscript on the table, its pages filled with careful script, outlining proposals for church councils to curb abuses like simony and nepotism. These men are not seeking glory, they're laboring in the shadows, determined to rebuild what was broken. A peculiar detail stands out. Some monasteries have begun copying manuscripts of early Christian texts, like the writings of St. Augustine, rediscovering teachings of humility and service that had been drowned out by the Crusades and indulgences of popes like Innocent III. You feel a quiet awe, realizing that these efforts are rebuilding the Church's foundation, not with gold or swords, but with words and ideas. The monks discuss the Fourth Lateran Council, which mandated annual confessions and standardized sacraments, bringing order to a church that had been chaotic under popes like Stephen VI. You sense their cautious hope, like gardeners tending a fragile sapling, knowing it will take years to bear fruit. You linger by the door, the scent of ink grounding you, and feel a connection to these quiet warriors of faith. You step back into the square, where a soft breeze carries the sound of a lute from a nearby tavern. The cobblestones gleam under the moonlight, and you notice a young boy handing out bread to a beggar, a small act that echoes the Franciscan spirit. You reflect on the contrast between this moment and the dark centuries you've witnessed the orgies of John XII, the cadaver trial of Stephen VI, the blood-soaked Crusades of Innocent III. Those popes left scar, but these reformers are stitching the wounds closed, not with grand gestures, but with countless small ones. You walk toward a fountain, its water gurgling softly, and dip your fingers into the cool stream, feeling the ripples spread outward. It's a reminder that change, even slow, can reshape the world. Suddenly, you hear the rustle of robes as a messenger hurries past, carrying a sealed letter. You follow him to a small chapel, where a group of bishops is gathered. The scent of cedar from the wooden beams fills the air as you listen. The messenger announces that Pope Honorius III has issued a decree supporting the mendicant orders, granting them greater freedom to preach and serve. The bishops exchange hopeful glances, their voices tinged with relief. They speak of new seminaries to train priests, of efforts to make the church more transparent, and of plans to rebuild trust with the faithful. But they also acknowledge the challenges, the wealth of the Vatican, the entrenched power of corrupt cardinals, and the lingering distrust from scandals like those of Boniface VIII. The room falls silent, save for the crackle of a small fire in the hearth. You sense their determination, like a river carving a new path through stone. These men know the Church's rebirth is fragile, that the sins of the past schisms, Crusades, and greed still cast long shadows. But they press on, driven by a vision of a church that reflects the humility of its founder, not the arrogance of men like Urban VI. You feel a swell of respect for their quiet courage, for their refusal to let the church remain a pawn of power, a final light joke. If these reformers had a team mascot, it'd be a dove with a tiny broom, sweeping away the mess of the past. You step out of the chapel, back into the plaza, where the moonlight bathes the cobblestones in a silver glow. The bells ring softly, their sound carrying a promise of renewal. Like a melody rising from the ashes, you feel a warmth despite the cool night. As you reflect on this slow rebirth, a church learning from its mistakes, guided by those who chose faith over fortune, service over splendor, the work of these reformers is a beacon, faint but growing, in the long shadow of corrupt popes. You think back to the chaos of the Borgias, the schisms of Urban VI, the bloodlust of Innocent III, and you realize how far the church has come. Even if the journey is far from over, the stars above twinkle, as if nodding in approval, and you feel a sense of peace. However, fleeting, you wander through the square, passing a group of children playing under a lantern. Their laughter, a stark contrast to the heavy tales you've uncovered. You pause by a stone bench, running your fingers over its weathered surface, and think of Saint Francis, who once stood in a square like this, preaching to anyone who would listen, man, woman, or sparrow. His legacy, and that of others like him, is what's pulling the church back from the brink. You hear a soft hymn from the basilica, its melody weaving through the night air, and it feels like a thread connecting the past to a hopeful future. The church is not yet whole, but it's healing, one humble act at a time. You take a deep breath, the scent of rosemary grounding you, and look up at the starry sky. The weight of the past centuries of corruption, betrayal, and bloodshed still lingers. But so does the promise of renewal. You feel the cobblestones beneath your feet, solid and enduring, a reminder that even the most broken things can be rebuilt. The reformers' work is slow, often invisible, but it's real, like roots spreading beneath the earth, waiting to bloom. You turn toward a narrow street, ready to step further into the story, where the lasting impact of these changes and the church's place in a changing world awaits. Part 14. Legacy endures you street, and in a moonlit courtyard in Rome, where the soft glow of lanterns on the ancient stone walls casts intricate shadows across the cobblestones, each one seeming to whisper tales of triumph and tragedy. The air carries the faint scent of blooming jasmine from a nearby garden, mingling with the distant echo of a choir practicing in a small chapel, their voices rising and falling like a gentle tide. It's 1220, and Rome is a city reborn, yet still haunted. Its streets alive, with the cautious hope of a church finding its way after centuries of darkness. Remember how the quiet reformers, inspired by Saint Francis and Saint Paul, Dominic, began stitching the church's wounds with humility and service. Well, now, you're about to see how the scandals of those corrupt popes, John XII's debauchery, Benedict XI's greed, Alexander VI's schemes, and others shaped the church's modern identity, leaving lessons that echo through time. Even to the present day, the air feels charged, as if the city is reflecting on its past while looking toward a fragile but promising future. You slip through a narrow archway leading to a bustling square outside St. Peter's Basilica, where the scent of fresh bread from a baker's stall mixes with the tangy bite of incense wafting from the church's open doors. Moonlight bathes the square, illuminating a tapestry of pilgrims, merchants, and priests who linger, their voices weaving a soft hum of hope, tempered by skepticism, a historical truth The scandals of the 10th to 13th centuries, from simony to Crusades, forced the Church to confront its flaws, leading to pivotal reforms like those of the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 and Didyme. Later, the Council of Trent in the 16th century. These councils tightened papal elections, curbed abuses like the sale of indulgences, and restored some credibility to an institution tarnished by popes like Leo X and Urban VI. You overhear a merchant whispering to a pilgrim, "The church is cleaner now, but it carries its sins like scars." A light joke if the church had a memoir. It'd be titled, "From Orgies to Order, a Papal Glow-Up." You step into the square, your boots clicking softly on the cobblestones, still warm from the day's sun. Their uneven surface, a reminder of Rome's enduring history. The basilica looms before you, its half-built dome, a symbol of the church's ambition to reclaim its glory. A project funded not by indulgences, but by a renewed sense of purpose. You notice a group of priests distributing alms to a line of ragged beggars, their simple woolen robes echoing the Franciscan spirit that's taken root since St. Francis walked these streets, unlike the gold-drenched excesses of Boniface VIII, who declared himself emperor. These acts feel grounded, a sign that the church is learning to prioritize souls over splendor. You pause by a fountain, its water gurgling softly, the cool mist brushing your face as you watch a young priest kneel to hand a loaf of bread to a widow, her eyes, weary but grateful, who reflect a flicker of trust, a trust nearly extinguished by popes like Stephen VI, whose cadaver trial turned faith into a grotesque spectacle. You move closer to the basilica's steps, the scent of wax from rows of votive candles filling the air, their flames dancing like tiny beacons in the night. A scholar, in a worn cloak, stands on the steps, lecturing a small crowd of travelers and clergy. His voice steady, but passionate. He speaks of how the church's darkest moments, John XII's brothels, Benedict IX's sale of the papacy, Alexander VI's Borgia, intrigues forced it to evolve. He mentions the Council of Constance in 1415, which ended the Great Western Schism sparked by Urban VI's paranoia, reuniting the church under a single pope after decades of rival claims. He also points to the Council of Trent, Century Later, which banned indulgences and reformed clergy training, a direct response to Leo X's excesses that ignited Martin Luther's rebellion. These councils, born from scandal, became the church's lifeline, proving it could learn from its mistakes. You lean against a stone pillar, feeling its cool, rough surface under your palm, and listen as the scholar's words weave a narrative of resilience. A strange detail catches your attention during the Council of Constance. Some clergy proposed a radical idea that the Pope's power should be limited, with authority shared among cardinals in a kind of ecclesiastical parliament. The suggestion was swiftly quashed by those who cherished papal supremacy, but it lingered in whispered debates, a seed of change that never fully sprouted. You shake your head, imagining how history might have unfolded if such a system had taken hold, perhaps sparing the church the arrogance of men like Boniface VIII, who declared himself above kings. Historians still debate whether these reforms strengthened the church enough to weather the storms of the Reformation or merely delayed its fractures. As Protestantism carved away half of Europe, whatever the truth, you sense the church's tenacity, a battered but unyielding institution forged in the crucible of its own failures. You leave the steps, wandering into a side street where the clatter of a blacksmith's hammer punctuates the night, its rhythmic clang, a reminder of Rome's ceaseless pulse. The air is cooler here, and you pull your cloak tighter, the wool scratching gently against your neck. You notice a small shrine tucked into a wall, its candles flickering, as passers-by pause to offer prayers, their breath visible in the chilly air. The shrine honors Saint Peter, the rock upon which the church was built. But it also serves as a quiet rebuke to popes like Benedict IX, who sold the papacy like a market trinket, or Alexander VI, whose Borgia dynasty turned faith into a family enterprise. These scandals, though painful, left a lasting legacy. They forced the church to confront its humanity, to acknowledge that even the holiest office could be corrupted by greed, lust, or pride. You feel a bittersweet pang, as if Rome itself is a living testament to both its failures and its capacity for redemption. You pause outside a tavern, where a group of travelers shares stories over mugs of ale, their laughter mingling with the scent of wood smoke and roasted meat. You lean against the rough wooden doorframe, listening as one traveler recounts how the church's modern structure, its seminaries, its clear doctrines, its global reach owes much to the lessons of its darkest days. Another speaks of lay movements, where ordinary believers, inspired by reformers like Saint Francis, began demanding a church that reflected their values of humility and service. A peculiar detail stands out in the 13th century. Some towns circulated satirical poems about corrupt popes, passed in secret as a form of protest, mocking men like John XII for their brothels or Sergius III for his pornocracy. These verses, a medieval equivalent of a viral meme, helped fuel calls for reform, reminding the faithful that the church belonged to them, not just to its flawed leaders. You smile, picturing a bard in a smoky tavern, singing of a pope's misdeeds to a chuckling crowd. You wander further, the street narrowing as you pass a row of shuttered shops, their wooden signs creaking in the breeze. You think of the popes whose scandals shaped this legacy: Innocent III's Crusades, which soaked Europe in blood; Urban VI's tyranny, which split the church; Leo X's indulgences, which sparked a Reformation. Each left a mark, not just in shame, but in the reforms they necessitated. The church learned to guard its elections, to train its clergy, to listen, however reluctantly, to its people. You stop by a small fountain, its water sparkling under the moonlight, and dip your fingers into the cool stream, feeling the ripples spread outward. It's a reminder that even the smallest actions, like those of the reformers, can create waves of change. Just as the sins of corrupt popes rippled through history, suddenly, you hear the soft tread of sandals as a messenger hurries past, clutching a letter sealed with the papal crest. You follow him to a grand hall, where bishops and scholars gather under the warm glow of torches. The scent of parchment and cedar fills the air as you slip into the shadows. Listening, the messenger announces that a new council is being planned, building on the reforms of the Fourth Lateran. To further strengthen the Church's foundation, the bishops discuss ways to make the papacy more transparent, to prevent the chaos caused by popes like Sergius III, who fathered a pope, or Boniface VIII, who claimed divine supremacy. They speak of educating the faithful, of ensuring that priests embody the humility of Saint Aprusts, Dominic rather than the arrogance of past pontiffs. Their voices are cautious, aware that reform is a delicate balance between preserving tradition and embracing change. You linger in the hall, the crackle of a fire in the hearth, blending with the rustle of parchment, as a scribe records the discussion. The bishops acknowledge the Church's scars, the schisms, the Crusades, the indulgences, but also its resilience. They speak of a church that has survived not because of its wealth or power, but because of its ability to adapt, to learn from its darkest moments. You feel a swell of respect for their quiet determination, for their refusal to let the sins of the past define the future. The hall is warm, the air thick with the scent of burning logs, and you sense a turning point, as if the church is stepping into a new chapter, one written in hope rather than hubris. You step back into the courtyard, where the moonlight bathes the cobblestones in a silver glow, their uneven surfaces catching the light like a mosaic of history. The chapel bells ring softly, their sound carrying a promise of continuity, a reminder that the church endures despite its flaws. You feel a warmth despite the cool night, as you reflect on the legacy of those corrupt popes, not just their sins, but the lessons they forced the church to learn. The scandals of John XII's parties, Stephen VI's madness, Alexander VI's plots, and Innocent III's wars were a crucible, forging a church that could adapt, reform, and survive. You think back to the chaos of the Borgias, the schisms of Urban VI, the bloodlust of Innocent III, and you realize their failures were not the end, but a painful beginning. You wander through the square, passing a group of children playing under a lantern, their laughter a bright contrast to the heavy tales you've uncovered. You pause by a stone bench, running your fingers over its weathered surface. Its cracks a map of Rome's turbulent past. The pilgrims who still come to this city, seeking solace despite the church's imperfect history, are proof of its enduring power. The legacy of those corrupt popes is not just one of shame, it's a warning, etched into the church's soul. That power without humility leads to ruin. You hear a soft hymn from the basilica, its melody weaving through the night air, like a thread connecting past mistakes to future hopes. The church is not perfect, but it's standing, its foundations strengthened by the reforms that followed its darkest days. You take a deep breath, the scent of jasmine grounding you, and look up at the starry sky. Each pinprick of light, a reminder of the countless lives touched by the church. For better or worse, the weight of history, centuries of corruption, betrayal, and redemption rests lightly now. Like a mantle passed to a new generation, you feel the cobblestones beneath your feet, solid and enduring, a testament to the church's ability to evolve, to learn from the greed of Benedict IX, the arrogance of Boniface VIII, the violence of Innocent III, their leçons en dur, not as a curse, but as a guide, urging the church to seek humility, service, and truth. You turn toward a narrow street, ready to step into the final chapter of this story, where a last reflection on this long journey awaits. Part 15. Looking back at the throne, you stand in a silent courtyard in Rome, where the pale glow of moonlight spills over the ancient cobblestones, casting long, soft shadows that seem to cradle the city's secrets. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of dew-kissed ivy, clinging to the stone walls, mingled with the distant murmur of a lone bell tolling in a nearby chapel. It's 1220, and Rome feels like a city pausing to catch its breath, its heart still beating with the echoes of a turbulent past. You've walked through centuries of scandal, from John XII's debauchery to Innocent III's Crusades, and witnessed the quiet reformers who began to heal the church's wounds. Now, you're about to step back and reflect on what those corrupt popes, Benedict IX, Alexander VI, Leo X, and others teach us about faith, power, and redemption. The air is still, as if the city is inviting you to linger, to ponder the lessons etched into its stones. You slip through a narrow archway leading to a quiet garden behind St. Peter's Basilica, where the scent of lavender and damp earth wraps around you like a gentle embrace. Moonlight filters through the leaves of an ancient olive tree, its gnarled branches swaying softly in the breeze. A historical truth: the corrupt popes of the 10th to 13th centuries, with their greed, violence, and betrayal, left a legacy that forced the church to confront its flaws, ultimately shaping a more resilient institution through reforms like the Fourth Lateran Council and the Mendicant Orders of St. Francis and St. Dominic. Their scandals, though devastating, were a crucible for growth, teaching the church the dangers of unchecked power. You overhear a monk whispering to a novice under the tree. Even the darkest shepherds led us to light. A light joke if those popes had a reunion. They'd probably argue over who caused the biggest mess, with John XII claiming the crown for best party pope. You step into the garden, your footsteps muffled by the soft earth, the cool grass brushing against your ankles. The basilica looms in the distance, its silhouette a reminder of the church's enduring presence. Despite the chaos of its past, you pause by a stone bench, its surface worn smooth by countless hands, and sit, feeling the weight of the journey you've taken. You think of Benedict IX, who sold the papacy like a trinket, leaving a church in disarray with 3 rival popes. You recall Alexander V, whose Borgia schemes turned the Vatican into a den of intrigue, his poison plots as infamous as his parties, and Leo X, whose indulgence sales sparked a Reformation that split Christendom. These men, draped in the robes of St. Peter, wielded faith like a weapon. Yet their failures forced the church to evolve, to embrace humility over hubris. You lean back, the bench cool against your back, and let your gaze drift to the stars twinkling above, each one a silent witness to Rome's triumphs and tragedies. The scent of lavender fills your lungs, grounding you as you reflect on the lessons of these popes. Their scandals, Urban VI, Stephen VI's Cadaver trial, Boniface VIII's arrogance, reveal a timeless truth: power, when divorced from accountability, corrupts even the holiest of offices. Yet, their missteps also sparked change. The Great Western Schism led to councils that unified the church. The sale of indulgences birthed reforms that banned such practices. The Crusades, though bloody, gave way to a church that learned to value dialogue over destruction. A strange detail in the 13th century. Some pilgrims began carving small crosses into the walls of churches, not just for devotion, but as a silent plea for a purer church. A grassroots call for reform that echoed the work of St. Thomas. Francis, you smile, imagining those tiny crosses, each one a whisper of hope amidst the chaos. You rise from the bench, walking toward a small fountain at the garden's center, its water shimmering under the moonlight, rippling with every drop. The sound is soothing, a gentle counterpoint to the turbulent tales you've uncovered. You think of the faithful peasants, merchants, kings who clung to their faith despite the church's betrayals. They prayed in the shadow of John XII's brothels, endured the schisms of Urban VI, and questioned the indulgences of Leo X. Their resilience, as much as the reformers' efforts, kept the church alive. Historians still debate whether the church's survival was due to its divine mandate or its ability to adapt, to learn from the sins of men like Sergius III, who fathered a pope, or Innocent III, who soaked Europe in blood. Whatever the truth, you feel a quiet awe, as if the church is a tapestry woven from both failure and redemption, its threads stretching across centuries. You pause by the fountain, dipping your fingers into the cool water, feeling the ripples spread outward, a metaphor for the far-reaching impact of those corrupt popes. Their legacy is not just scandal, but transformation. The church learned to guard its elections, to train its clergy, to listen, however, reluctantly to its people. You think of the Fourth Lateran Council, which curbed simony, and the Council of Trent, which centuries later would solidify these reforms. These changes, born from the ashes of corruption, ensured that no pope could ever again sell the throne like Benedict IX, or declare himself God like Boniface VIII. A light joke if the church had a report card for the 13th century. It'd get an A for learning from mistakes, but a C for taking way too long. You leave the garden, stepping into a narrow street where the clatter of a night watchman's boots echoes faintly. The air is crisp, and you pull your cloak tighter, the wool soft against your skin. You notice a small crowd gathered around a Franciscan friar, preaching under a lantern, his voice warm and steady, urging his listeners to seek God in simplicity. His words echo Saint Francis, whose love for the poor reshaped the church's mission. You linger, watching the faces of the crowd, young and old, rich and poor, soften with hope. This is the church that emerged from the darkness, not perfect, but striving, shaped by the lessons of its worst leaders. You feel a warmth in your chest, as if the city itself is whispering that even the deepest wounds can heal. You wander further, passing a row of shuttered shops, their signs creaking in the breeze. You think of how the church's modern identity, its global reach, seminary, its emphasis on service, owes much to the crucible of its past. The scandals of those popes forced it to confront its humanity, to recognize that faith is not a crown to be worn, but a responsibility to be lived. You stop by a small chapel, its wooden door ajar, and peek inside. The scent of incense and cedar fills the air, and you see a lone priest kneeling before a simple altar, his head bowed in prayer. It's a stark contrast to the pomp of Alexander VI's Vatican or the violence of Innocent III's Crusades. This quiet devotion, this return to essentials, is the legacy of reform, a direct response to centuries of excess. Suddenly, you hear the soft rustle of robes as a group of monks passes by, carrying manuscripts bound for a nearby monastery. You follow them to a modest scriptorium, where the scent of ink and vellum is thick in the air. The monks are copying texts from the early church fathers, their quills scratching softly as they work by candlelight. They speak in hushed tones of a church that's learning to balance tradition with change, to honor its past while embracing a humbler future. One monk mentions a new papal decree supporting the mendicant orders, a sign that leaders like Honorius III are building on the work of reformers. A peculiar detail: some monks have begun illustrating their manuscripts with images of St. Francis preaching to animals, a nod to his eccentric but heartfelt faith that inspired a generation. You smile, picturing those drawings, a quiet rebellion against the grandeur of popes like Leo X. You step back into the street, the moonlight guiding your path as you reflect on the journey. The corrupt popes John XII, Stephen VI, Urban VI, Boniface VIII, Innocent III, Benedict XIX, Leo X, Alexander VI were not the church's end, but its crucible. Their scandals, from brothels to crusades, from schisms to poison, exposed the church's fragility, but also its strength. They forced it to evolve, to embrace reforms that made it more accountable, more human. You think of the faithful who endured, the reformers who rebuilt, and the lessons that linger. Power corrupts, but redemption is possible. You feel the cobblestones beneath your feet, solid and enduring, a reminder that even the most flawed institutions can change. You pause by a stone wall, running your fingers over its rough surface, and look up at the starry sky. The bells toll softly, their sound fading into the night, a gentle lullaby for a city that's seen it all. You feel a peace settle over you, as if Rome is whispering its final lesson: faith endures, not because it's perfect, but because it's human, capable of falling and rising again. Closing reflection. And so, dear listener, as the moonlight fades and the stars grow dim, you stand at the end of our journey through Rome's darkest and brightest moments. The corrupt popes, with their scandals and sins, are gone, their voices silenced by time, but their lessons linger, soft as a whisper in the night. You've walked through their chaos, felt the weight of their betrayals, and seen the quiet heroes who brought the church back to life. Now, as you close your eyes, let the cobblestones, the bells, the scent of jasmine carry you into rest. The church stands, flawed but enduring, a testament to redemption. Sleep gently, knowing that even the deepest shadows give way to dawn. Kết thúc kịch bản. Ngủ ngon.